Chapter 144. Behind this layer of silk, Xiao Xian didn't find anything special at the angle between the protruding rocks and the mountain wall. There were only some crawl marks. He looked carefully again, but didn't find even a single piece of shit. He thought he would find some treasure, but he didn't expect the white worm's nest to be so clean. Xiao Xian looked down the steep slope again, but didn't find any traces of the white worm. It was obvious that the white worm hadn't come down recently. After finding the white worm's nest and finding nothing else, Xiao Xian decided to go back. After taking 2 steps, Xiao Xian stopped and thought for a moment. Xiao Xian walked behind a protruding rock not far from here. Before he left, he cleaned up his tracks and leaned against the rock to wait. Although Yang Guang was there, the ice pellets that fell from time to time weren't enjoyable. The temperature didn't rise, but when Yang Guang gradually disappeared, the temperature dropped sharply. However, for Xiao Xian, who was used to the temperature at the top of the mountain, this temperature was still bearable and he could sleep. When the sun only left a faint light on the horizon, the white worm returned. Because every step it took was tightly wrapped around the ice and rocks, it naturally made a sound. Xiao Xian was resting with his eyes closed, but when he heard the noise, he quickly looked over. From the angle that Xiao Xian chose, he could clearly see the white worm's movements outside and inside the nest. Although the sun had already set, the 2 moons in the sky provided enough light for Xiao Xian to see the situation over there. After eating its fill and returning to the nest, the white worm excreted. One by one, white translucent balls of ice came out from its tail. After the white worm finished excreting, it kicked the balls of ice down the mountain one by one. Xiao Xian. This worm was really obsessed with cleanliness. It even knew not to dump feces in its nest. After eating and drinking its fill, the white worm lay down in the nest and didn't move. Xiao Xian didn't look again and leaned against the rock to sleep. The next day, before the sun completely rose, the white worm left the nest. After it, Xiao Xian also went up the mountain. In the next few days, Xiao Xian did not go down the mountain, nor did he follow the white worm. Instead, he continued to explore other places on the ice field. After familiarizing himself with the terrain, Xiao Xian also sped up. A few days later, Xiao Xian returned to his original location. He didn't turn back, but because this ice field was circular, he would naturally return to his original location after walking around. During this process, Xiao Xian encountered a few more insects that looked like the white worm, but he didn't spend any more time tracking them. Xiao Xian returned to the starting point, but he didn't see the white worm anywhere. He looked around and didn't see any traces of the white worm. Curious, Xiao Xian went down the mountain and went to the white worm's nest to investigate. He happened to see the worm that had just finished shedding its skin. The shed skin was the same color as the silk it spat out, transparent. Perhaps because it had just finished shedding its skin, it was a little tired. After resting for a while, it moved and kicked the pile of skin out of the nest. Xiao Xian wanted to take the worm skin to see. The tribe was too short on resources, so if there was something good, they would try to get it. That worm skin might be a rare treasure, but the white worm didn't care about it and kicked it out of the nest. At first, Xiao Xian was worried that the worm's skin would be blown away by the strong wind, but the next moment, the worm's skin that was kicked off fell straight down and hit the ice below with a bang. Looking at the hole made by the worm's skin, Xiao Xian was stunned. Even the worm's skin was so heavy, so the white worm itself must be heavier. He really couldn't tell. Xiao Xian couldn't directly go over and get the worm's skin now. The white worm was still resting in the nest and had to wait for an opportunity. And this opportunity had been waiting for an entire night. When the sun rose again, the white worm that had shed its skin for a night climbed up the mountain like a ghost. Xiao Xian went over and picked up the worm's skin that had been smashed into the snow. After a night, the worm's skin was covered with ice and snow. Brushing away the snow, Xiao Xian picked up the worm's skin. The heaviness in his hand was completely different from the appearance of this worm's skin. However, for people who often moved stones in the tribe, this weight was still bearable. Xiao Xian held the transparent worm skin in his hand and could clearly see the lines on his palm. He pulled hard and didn't tear it. It was indeed a good thing. Xiao Xian rolled up the worm skin and tied it with a leather rope from the animal skin bag. Looking around the nest, Xiao Xian didn't find any other worm skin, so he cleaned up the surroundings and went up the mountain. After that, Xiao Xian went to look for other white worms. Following their footsteps, he found the nest and picked up 2 more worm skins. He didn't see the rest. Maybe they hadn't shed their skin yet, or maybe they kicked it too far away and the worm skins weren't around. They could even be wrapped in snow and rolled down the mountain. Xiao Xian saw traces of snow sliding down the mountain in several places. Xiao Xian couldn't do anything about it. While Xiao Xian was looking for worm hives and collecting worm skins, Xiao Xian noticed that the white worms' bodies were becoming transparent. They were originally snow-white, but gradually they became translucent, and their transparency increased day by day. Finally, one day the white worms all disappeared. Xiao Xian saw the worms that had turned into cocoons in the nest. There were no cocoons, but the layer of silk around them was thicker. The cocoons were also transparent and had edges. At first glance, they looked like transparent ice. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't be able to see that there was a cocoon there. He didn't know how long this cocoon would last. Xiao Xian would go down the mountain to have a look every few days. He knew a few stone worm nests, and the detailed locations were recorded in his mind, so it wasn't hard to find them. At other times, Xiao Xian would slowly absorb the energy from the ice on the ice pillars. He found that in this place, when he calmed down, his heart was very peaceful. It was very suitable for absorption. The energy on the ice wasn't ordinary energy. It was different from the energy contained in the fire crystal, and it wasn't pure either. However, the energy of the fire crystal could only play a supporting role for Xiao Xian. The totem in his sea of consciousness didn't change at all. This was the difference between Xiao Xian and the others in the tribe. Every time the ice on the pillar absorbed the energy, there would be a very small amount of energy gathered in the totem. This was the fundamental reason why Xiao Xian was able to operate the totem's power. The 2 moons in the night sky gradually became full, and the night became brighter as they got closer. On this day, the 2 moons overlapped. Xiao Xian walked out of the clouds on the top of the mountain, and looked at the moon in the night sky. When he was in the tribe, he could hear the roars of the beasts in the forest far away. But here it was very quiet. He couldn't hear any birds or beasts, as if he was isolated from the world. From the first hunt of the year to now, the 2 moons overlapped. In the blink of an eye, nearly half a year had passed. Suddenly, Xiao Xian felt that something seemed to be happening at the bottom of the steep slope. Thinking of the white worms that had turned into pupae, Xiao Xian decided to go down the mountain to have a look. This night, under the overlapping moons, everything was as bright as day. This night was unusual for the beasts and ferocious beasts. Therefore, Xiao Xian was extra careful when he went down the mountain. When he finally came near the white worm nest, Xiao Xian saw a much smaller worm coming out of the nest. It looked like a butterfly without wings, with 2 club-shaped antennae. When it climbed out and climbed up the protruding rock, white light like electricity was emitted from its body, forming the shape of a wing and stretched out. The wing grew bigger and bigger, until it almost covered the protruding rock. The white fluorescent wings slowly flapped twice, and then rested for a while. Then, the worm jumped down from the rock, flapped its wings, and flew away. Looking at the distance, there were also some white light spots, which were the white worms in other parts of the mountain. Those white worms that had turned into pupae all turned into butterflies at the same time. There was no starlight in the night sky, and these white butterflies were like the stars in the night. There was still a cold wind with ice and snow, but it didn't seem to have any effect on them, and they continued to fly steadily, further and further away. Xiao Xian stood there, watching the light spots become smaller and smaller until they disappeared. Then, he retracted his gaze and looked at the white worm nest. The silk was still there. If it continued to stay there, and no one touched it for a long time, the silk net would be blocked by the wind and snow. When the white worms turned into pupae, there would be a thick layer of ice and snow on the silk. Xiao Xian went over and pulled the silk. These silk were not easy to cut. During this time, Xiao Xian had studied the worm's skin, and he found that the wrinkled worm's skin was not easy to flatten, but it was much easier if he instilled totemic power into it. Xiao Xian used the same method to get the silk. Originally, the silk was tightly attached to the rock, almost as if it was one with the rock. After Xiao Xian instilled totemic power into it, he pulled it off with a little force. Unlike the heavy skin that the white worms shed, these silk were very light, which made Xiao Xian even more happy. There was nothing left in the stone worm's nest, not even a broken pupa. He didn't know if it had been kicked down the mountain early, or if it had decomposed on its own, or if it had been eaten by the white worms. It didn't matter if he couldn't find it, for Xiao Xian, getting these silk was already the biggest gain of the night. He went to a few places, raided the white worms' nests, and got quite a lot of silk. Of course, the white worms didn't care about these silk. If they did, they wouldn't have left it here. In some of the nests, the silk nets had been cut and bitten, and then the white worms had let them flutter in the wind. Xiao Xian's operation of collecting the silk lasted for 2 days, and at this time, new giant eagles arrived. Just like when Cha-Cha and the other eagles came, these giant eagles were very tired, and looked like they were in poor health, like old men in their twilight years. The continuous arrival of these giant eagles made Xiao Xian know that perhaps Cha-Cha and the rest would be back soon. Because the giant eagles had gathered on the ice field again, Xiao Xian didn't run around anymore. He waited at the place where he and Cha-Cha and the rest stood, trying to reduce his presence as much as possible. Xiao Xian chewed on some ice, while paying attention to the giant eagles that passed by. While chewing, Xiao Xian felt that something was wrong. He looked up and saw a giant eagle fall, and with a bang, it fell in front of Xiao Xian. The eagle's head was not far from Xiao Xian, so he could see it very clearly. For a moment, big eyes met small eyes. Chapter 145. This eagle was bigger than the one that had brought them here. It looked like it had traveled a long way and was extremely tired. After falling on the ice, it did not move, only gasping for breath. Originally, it was just looking around casually, but it did not expect to find Xiao Xian. Then, it stared at Xiao Xian as if he was a rare thing. Xiao Xian was still holding a piece of ice in his hand. Being stared at by a giant eagle, he could not eat it. What did that eagle mean? Xiao Xian did not feel any malice from the eagle's eyes. He was just curious about the eagle's reaction. After staring for a while, the eagle looked away and looked at the icicle next to Xiao Xian. Then it looked at Xiao Xian. Did it mean that? Xiao Xian took out his teeth knife and pried a piece of ice off the icicle. When he turned his head, he found that the eagle was staring at the teeth knife in his hand. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian stuck the teeth knife into the ice next to him. He did not take the knife, but raised the ice in his hand. Xiao Xian was about to throw the ice over, but unexpectedly, the eagle opened its mouth. Seeing that Xiao Xian did not move, it raised its curved beak again, as if urging Xiao Xian to move. Xiao Xian moved forward step by step. He did not have a knife, and the eagle did not show any malice, but when facing such a giant beast, he had to be careful. After getting close, Xiao Xian quickly threw the ice in his hand into the eagle's mouth, and quickly stepped back. The eagle did not bite. After the ice was thrown in, it swallowed it directly. Then, it continued to open its mouth at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian pried another piece of ice from the icicle and threw it into the eagle's mouth. After more than 10 times, the eagle shook its wings and got up from the ground. When it flapped its wings and rose up, Xiao Xian felt the ice shards and cold mist coming at him. He raised his hand to block them. Compared to the big eagle that brought them here, this eagle in front of them seemed to be familiar with humans. The reason why it showed such a strange expression when it saw Xiao Xian was that Xiao Xian felt that it probably didn't expect to see someone in such a place. Could it be that they also lived in the forest around the hunting grounds? Suddenly, Xiao Xian's eyes narrowed. He couldn't help but take 2 steps forward and stare at the eagle's claws. There was a very vague pattern on it. Although he couldn't see it clearly, Xiao Xian was sure that it wasn't a painting of the Yinjiao tribe. According to the eagle's behavior just now, it didn't seem like an eagle that had never been in contact with humans. There were too many human-like things in its eyes, just like Cha-Cha. It was as if it had been in contact with humans for a long time, which made it different from the giant eagles in the wild. The giant eagle walked with heavy steps to a taller icicle and pecked at the ice on it. Xiao Xian followed it. He got closer and carefully looked at the pattern on the eagle's claws. Because the outer layer of the eagle's claws had begun to fall off, the pattern was incomplete. Xiao Xian could only speculate about the missing part. Thinking that it might be a pattern left by someone from another tribe, Xiao Xian felt a burst of excitement. He had been in this world for so long, but he had never seen anyone other than his tribe. Xiao Xian drew on the ground with his teeth knife. The eagle next to him had almost finished eating. It was much better than before, when it couldn't even stand up. It lowered its head and watched Xiao Xian draw on the ground with his teeth knife. At first, it watched quietly, but after a while, when Xiao Xian drew a stroke, it screamed and scratched the drawing on the ground with its cracked claws. Wrong? Let me try again. After a few strokes, it scratched again. Wrong again? Again. One drew, the other scratched. When the surrounding ice had been scratched, the eagle finally couldn't stand it anymore. It screamed at Xiao Xian and twitched its neck. Hey, what are you doing? Wait. Seeing this, Xiao Xian quickly took a few steps back. Whoa, a pool of vomit fell in front of Xiao Xian. Fortunately, Xiao Xian dodged quickly. Otherwise, he would have been splashed on the head. There were also pieces of meat from some unknown animal in the vomit. Xiao Xian was speechless. Just as he was thinking about whether to hide further away, Xiao Xian's eyes were suddenly attracted by a stone in the pool of vomit. It was a polished stone, only the size of Xiao Xian's palm. Ignoring the disgusting vomit, Xiao Xian quickly walked over and took out the polished stone. After picking it up, Xiao Xian rubbed it on the eagle's feathers, then took it aside and observed it carefully. On the black flat stone there was a pattern drawn with white paint. It should be the same as the one on the eagle's feet. The pattern looked like an abstract rolling cloud. The material used for the drawing was very strange. After being swallowed by the eagle, the pattern on the stone was not blurred at all. The stone was also intact. Although he didn't know why the eagle swallowed the stone and spat it out spontaneously, Xiao Xian was more concerned about the pattern and the stone. Where did it come from? The eagle in front of him looked at the stone with a very gentle gaze. Unfortunately, the eagle couldn't speak, and Xiao Xian didn't understand its language. He could only guess the general meaning from some of its body movements. However, it spat out the stone because it saw Xiao Xian drawing the pattern wrong again and again, so it couldn't help but show Xiao Xian the correct pattern. The stone was very good, at least of the highest quality. It was made of the highest quality stone and special paint. What was drawn on it was usually a pattern that the painter thought was very important, such as a tribal totem. From this painting, Xiao Xian could feel the reverence of the painter when he painted. He didn't know if this eagle lived in a human tribe like the Cha-Cha, but because they couldn't be engraved, they left a pattern on their feet. Xiao Xian didn't see this pattern on the stone wall of the cave near the mountain foot of the tribe, but the animal skin rolls left by the ancestors might be able to find relevant information. When he went back, he would draw it and show it to the shaman. Thinking of this, Xiao Xian handed the stone back to the eagle, But the eagle just lowered its head and pushed the stone towards Xiao Xian with its curved beak. "Give it to me?" Xiao Xian asked in a low voice. There were other giant eagles walking around, so Xiao Xian didn't want to disturb them. The giant eagle screamed, then turned back and walked towards the icicle it had just bitten, and fell down beside it. However, its eyes were clear and its breathing was strong. It didn't have any serious injuries or fractures. It was just too tired and couldn't stand stably. When it fell down beside the icicle, it could bite the icicle with its beak. Xiao Xian smiled and shook his head. How long had it flown and how many battles had it experienced to be so tired? Looking at the stone in his hand, Xiao Xian carefully put it into the animal skin bag. When he went back, he would show it to the shaman. It would be best if he could find some relevant information from the ancient scroll. Originally, Xiao Xian wanted to find a good stone and carve a tribal totem as an exchange. However, after thinking about it, Xiao Xian gave up. Even if he knew about the existence of other tribes, he didn't know if the tribe had any enmity with other tribes. Therefore, he didn't dare to act rashly. Every day, giant mountain eagles of various sizes would arrive. Some of them came alone, while others came in pairs or in group. However, with that eagle next to him, the other eagles wouldn't come to fight for the territory, let alone notice Xiao Xian. The surrounding eagles became more and more silent. Even the eagle standing next to Xiao Xian didn't want to talk to the outside world. Other than eating, it just stood quietly beside the icicle. Sometimes, when Xiao Xian talked to it, it only responded with a slight sound. When the fog thinned, Xiao Xian knew that it was time. Yang Guang shone the light on the ice field. The fog completely dissipated, and the familiar cry of the eagles sounded again. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One by one, huge and strong figures appeared in the sky above. They cried loudly to vent their excitement, as if they were celebrating their new life. Jiao, the eagle next to him, called to Xiao Xian. It was about to leave. "Good luck!" Xiao Xian waved to it. Jiao, another eagle cry, but this time, it didn't come from the eagle next to him, but from the sky. Xiao Xian put his finger in his mouth and whistled. A figure separated from the group of eagles flying above and flew towards Xiao Xian. After not seeing him for so long, Xiao Xian almost didn't recognize him. The last time they met, Cha-Cha wasn't even as tall as Xiao Xian. Now, he had doubled in size. Standing on the ground, he was more than 3 meters tall. The eagles on the ice field had already begun to fly down into the abyss, and Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha were about to return to the tribe. Another eagle cry came from the sky not far away. It was the big eagle that had brought them here before. Its body had also doubled in size. It had a sharp beak, sharp claws, and powerful wings. Its old appearance had completely disappeared, and in its place was a body that was full of strength like that of a young man. That eagle cried to Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha, and then flew away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. "We should also go back." Xiao Xian patted Cha-Cha, who was showing off by flapping his wings, and walked towards the steep slope. This time, Xiao Xian didn't need to grab Cha-Cha's claws, and could directly jump onto the eagle's back. However, before that, Xiao Xian still had things to take. "Wait a moment, I have something to bring." Xiao Xian walked down the steep slope, and came to a place, and began to dig with his teeth knife. Cha-Cha saw this, and also used its claws to help. Previously, when Cha-Cha scratched the rocks, it could only leave shallow marks on the rock. Now, it could easily cut off a large piece of rock with one claw. It was even easier for it to claw ice as if it was tofu. Soon, Xiao Xian dug out the skin and silk of the white worms that were buried by Xiao Xian. The skin and silk were in good condition. "This is very heavy, can you do it?" Xiao Xian raised the 3 rolls of white worm skin and said. "Jiao, okay, let's try it first." Xiao Xian carried the 3 rolls of white worm skin and silk, and jumped onto Cha-Cha's back. "Take off." "Jiao!" After a cry, Cha-Cha swooped down. Xiao Xian looked back at the top of the mountain. The mountain peak towered into the clouds, and was hidden in the clouds. Surrounded by clouds, the mountain was still the same. Thousands of years had passed, and the ice field at the top of the mountain continued to cycle day after day, with new and old people replacing each other. When they came, they were old and weak, and when they left, they were reborn. Chapter 146. It had to be said that after this trip, although Cha-Cha was not reborn like those older giant eagles, his body size had obviously increased. His endurance and flying speed had improved a lot. Even if he was carrying a person on his back and some heavy objects, he could still handle it easily. After flying down from the mountain, Xiao Xian could no longer see the other giant eagles. They returned to their own homes and had nothing to do with each other. They would only fight each other to the death when it came to a fight over territory. When they saw each other, they would probably think, "Oh, so it's you, kid. You were in the same batch as me when we entered Eagle Mountain." Or maybe it would be hard for them to see each other again in this lifetime. On this trip, Xiao Xian had seen the legendary Eagle Mountain, the so-called Land of Faith of the giant eagles. He had seen how they had undergone a huge transformation after being reborn here, and how they had collected rare treasures. More importantly, Xiao Xian had seen the first item from a foreign tribe. It could be said that this trip had not been in vain. Although Cha-Cha had grown bigger and could fly faster, it was inevitable that it would encounter a lot of trouble without the protection of a giant eagle. As a result, the return trip had taken a long time. However, on the way back, Xiao Xian had also fought to his heart's content. On the ice field at the top of the mountain, he had spent most of his time quietly absorbing the energy in the ice. Before the arrival of a new batch of giant eagles, he could still walk around, but when the number of giant eagles on the ice field increased, he did not dare to move recklessly. During the time on the ice field, Xiao Xian had discovered that the totem tattoos on his arms had unknowingly extended past his elbows. On the way back to the city, Xiao Xian had a good fight with the ferocious beast. Of course, Xiao Xian would not overestimate himself and practice with the ferocious beasts that were beyond his ability. Unless there was a sudden crisis, Xiao Xian's practice target was chosen after careful analysis. Many times he would get injured. When he was attacked by the fearsome beasts that were very good at hiding, Xiao Xian had almost lost his life. These were not the kind of beasts they had encountered on the way to Eagle Mountain. Because of the protection of the experienced giant eagle, Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha, who was considered small among the giant mountain eagles, did not become the dung of those fearsome beasts. The dangers in the forest were far beyond Xiao Xian's expectations. Now that he thought about it, he had been too arrogant when he made the decision to leave the tribe with Cha-Cha. Vigilance needed to be stimulated by danger again and again. After a long period of stability, that kind of intuition would gradually fade. It would only be picked up again after the next battle. For Cha-Cha, who liked to fight and held grudges, the snakes in the forest that looked like branches were its mortal enemies. Many times along the way, it ate those snakes. If it could not defeat the big ones, it would pick the smaller ones. After gnawing on ice for nearly a year, Xiao Xian felt like crying when he finally got to eat the warm beast meat roasted over fire. Cha-Cha was the same. When he was biting and pecking, he was quite fierce, as if someone was snatching food from him. Calculating the time, Xiao Xian guessed that it would probably be winter when they returned to the tribe. "Do you miss old Ku, Caesar, and the people in the tribe?" Xiao Xian said, patting Cha-Cha, who was biting and pecking at its prey. Cha-Cha paused its biting, as if it was recalling something. It let out a cry, and then its biting became even fiercer. When it was tearing, the blood on the meat was flung far away. Seeing Cha-Cha like this, Xiao Xian thought that it was probably thinking of the beasts in the tribe that had been successfully branded. It was thinking of teaching them a lesson when they returned. When the familiar, severing land appeared in their sight, Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha became more anxious to return. However, even though they were anxious, they still needed to be cautious and alert. After passing through the thorny land, they arrived at the third hunting location. The hunting team had already returned. Xiao Xian did not meet them, but from the traces in the third hunting location, he guessed that the hunting team had only left for 3 or 4 days. The hunting ground was still dangerous, but Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha felt inexplicably relieved. Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha rested in the cave of the third hunting location for one night, and continued their journey the next day. The mountain that separated the first and second hunting areas was too high to climb, but after seeing the mountain range beside the Eagle Mountain, they no longer felt that way. They did not choose to go through the mountain passage, but directly climbed over the mountain. Passing through the clouds, the cold mist was very familiar. Just a little more, we're almost there. Jiao, standing on the top of the mountain, Xiao Xian did not feel any tightness in his chest, nor did the low temperature make Xiao Xian shiver. It seemed that everything had become easier. Let's go home. The eagle's claws kicked hard, and it flapped its wings and flew away. In the tribe, this year's hunting was over, and everyone was busy repairing the roof, preparing for the winter. The shaman said that it would be winter tomorrow, so they had to hurry up. Old Ku stood on Caesar's back with one leg, and strengthened the windows. After knocking for a while, Old Ku stopped and sighed. He got down from Caesar's back, threw the stone hammer in his hand on the ground, and sat down, looking into the distance. Caesar, when do you think Xian will come back? It's winter. Old Ku said in a low voice. Caesar also lowered his ears, and walked around the house, sniffing everywhere, and then went back to Old Ku's side to lie down, listening to Old Ku's sigh. If Xian was here, Xian would definitely be among the 30 people who opened up the new hunting route, and the shaman would definitely let Xian go with them. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian left early in the morning, and hasn't come back yet. Lei took advantage of him. Old Ku didn't want to give up. For the warriors of the tribe, it was a great honor to be able to participate in opening up a new hunting route. It was said that when the candidates were chosen, the two groups of people on the mountain even fought, and the noise was so loud that people near the mountain foot area could hear it. It was also said that when the two groups were fighting, the shaman just watched quietly, and did not stop them. Therefore, some people guessed that the shaman chose people based on their fighting strength. Therefore, the final 30 candidates were all the victors of that contest. However, no one in the mountain foot area had seen that scene with their own eyes, so everyone's discussion was completely based on hearsay and their own imagination. According to the customs and rules of the tribe, they guessed right, but in fact, only a few people knew the truth. Uncle Ku, I brought the food. Under the shaman's order, Tua brought some processed food. Old Ku's sigh just now was also heard by Tua. As one of the people who lived on the mountain and participated in the opening of the new hunting route, he naturally knew the truth better than others. At that time, the chief, the shaman, 2 team leaders, and several elders with a lot of power gathered together to discuss the final candidate. The discussion turned into a quarrel. People in the tribe were like this. Once they were agitated, the quarrel directly turned into action. Other people on the mountain were also called over to join the fight between the two sides. Unlike the usual sparring sessions, the battle that time was beyond everyone's imagination. It was a large-scale internal strife. Several warriors were still in the tribe to recuperate until the end of winter, and could go out to participate in the hunting. But the shaman's expression was very calm, so calm that it scared Ta and Gigu. They didn't notice it when they were fighting, but when they saw it again, they found the shaman's expression was very strange. They couldn't tell whether he was sad or angry, and even a little absent-minded, as if he didn't care about the fight between the two most outstanding groups of people in the tribe. It wasn't just the 2 team leaders. Even the old man, who had been relying on his seniority and whose ancestors had produced many leaders, also fell silent. The people who quarreled and fought fiercely were like a basin of cold water poured on them. When the shaman left, he didn't say anything. He just wrote down 30 names on the animal skin roll, and then went back to rest calmly. After that, many people went to ask for forgiveness, but the shaman still wore his usual indifferent smile. People who had been with the shaman for a long time knew that he had something on his mind, but even the oldest people in the tribe couldn't guess what he was thinking. The two team leaders wanted to use the results of the new route to make the shamaness feel better. However, the shamaness was not as excited as they thought. Regarding this, the leader and the elders were very curious. However, they could not get an answer from the shamaness. Alas! Tua sighed and left after delivering the food. At the door of the house, after old Ku thanked Tua, he continued to sit there and talk with Caesar. When old Ku was talking, Caesar, who was lying on the ground next to him, suddenly stood up, his ears erect, and stared in one direction. Old Ku followed Caesar's line of sight. That was the direction from the hunting ground back to the tribe. Could it be old Ku suddenly stood up? Caesar, send me over. Before he finished, old Ku saw Caesar rush over like an arrow. Old Ku, who was left in the same place, Tua, who was thinking with his head down, heard an eagle cry from afar when he was halfway up the mountain. He stopped and looked over, his eyes wide open. Shit! That guy came back. Tua quickened his pace and went up the mountain. He had to report to the shaman, hoping that the news of Xian's return could make the shaman feel better. Old Ku stood at the door of the house, looking at the figure in the sky that was getting closer and closer. His eyes were sore, and his hand holding the walking stick was shaking badly. On the mountain, the beasts who were rolling on the ground or stealing food all stopped what they were doing, and ran out of the house to look at the sky. The shaman walked out of the stone house and stood at the door, looking at the figure flying down from the sky. It was much bigger than the one in his memory, and the man on the eagle's back with a smile in his eyes. Every time the mountain eagle went to a land of faith, it would grow stronger and grow stronger. It would fly higher and further. When Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha left the tribe, it was just the first hunting trip of the year. Now, they came back just one day before winter. The two guards in front of the stone house winked at each other. It was the first time they saw the shaman smiling so happily. Chapter 147. Cha-Cha landed directly in front of the house. Caesar ran over and ran back. Xiao Xian jumped down from Cha-Cha's back and strode towards old Ku, giving him a hug. I'm back! It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Old Ku hammered Xiao Xian's shoulder. It's sturdy now. Walking into the house, Xiao Xian glanced around. It was still the same as when he left. The only difference was that there was a wooden box at the side, filled with polished stone tools. These were all old Ku's masterpieces. Caesar leaned forward with all his might, groaning. Long time no see, old buddy. Looking at Caesar, who was now over 2 meters tall, Xiao Xian raised his hand and rubbed his lowered head. After the excitement, old Ku realized that something was wrong. He looked outside and saw Cha-Cha standing outside, struggling. In the past, it could still squeeze into the house, but now it obviously couldn't. Even if it didn't spread its wings, it felt that the space was too narrow. Even Caesar, who squeezed into the house, could only raise his feet carefully, afraid that he would accidentally step on something important or bump into a table or chair. This is Cha-Cha? Old Ku walked over with his walking stick, his eyes shining as he looked at it. How did it change so much in less than a year? Xiao Xian poured a pot of water, washed himself casually, and changed his clothes. Then, he realized that old Ku had already cooked the meat soup in the pot. He even added some mountain fruits into it. The first time he drank it, Xiao Xian felt that the taste was strange, but he got used to it and felt that it wasn't bad. During the time he was away, he had to be vigilant at all times. Even if he roasted the meat, it was done in a hurry. He didn't have the time to care about how the meat was roasted. It was fine as long as there was something to eat, not to mention cooking meat soup. When he arrived at Eagle Mountain, he had to chew on ice cubes again. The cold made his teeth chatter. Xiao Xian still remembered it clearly. He hadn't had hot meat soup for nearly a year. After drinking a big bowl of it, his whole body felt warm, and the fatigue from the continuous journey was dispelled. Now that he was back, he felt calm. Old Ku told Xiao Xian about what happened in the tribe during his absence. He told him about the things he complained to Caesar every day. As he spoke, he peeled some nuts he picked from the nearby mountains and threw them into the mouth of Cha-Cha, who stuck his head in through the window. After drinking the soup and ate a few pieces of roasted meat, Xiao Xian said to Old Ku, "You rest at home first, I have to go up to the mountains." Go up to the mountains? What are you going to do?" Old Ku became nervous. The conflict between the two groups of people on the mountain was getting deeper and deeper. He heard from those who often went up the mountain that there were fights every day, and the fights were quite fierce. "I'm going to find the shaman," Xiao Xian said. Yes, you should go to the shaman." Old Ku was relieved when he heard that Xiao Xian was going to find the shaman. "Go ahead, it's still early. I'll make a bird's nest for Cha-Cha. Hey, there's a lot of wood in the house. 2 days ago, Tu and the little stutterer helped me cut down a lot of trees." Thinking of Tu and the stutterer, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, Xiao Xian smiled. "You can use the wood. If it's not enough, I'll cut more, or let Cha-Cha pull the trees out herself." Without Caesar and Cha-Cha, Xiao Xian left the house, greeted the people he knew along the way, and walked up the mountain. In the tribe, many people saw the eagle flying back, but because they were a little far away, except for those who lived near Xiao Xian at the foot of the mountain, most people didn't notice Cha-Cha's current size. Halfway up the mountain, Xiao Xian was stopped by a rough voice when he was still some distance away from the top. Hearing this voice, Xiao Xian looked over. Kiki. It was Kiki who stopped Xiao Xian. When Tuo went up the mountain to report, Kiki also knew about it. He originally planned to find Xiao Xian tomorrow, but was bored lying on the roof. He didn't expect to see Xiao Xian walking up the mountain, so he immediately ran over. Seeing Kiki's figure, Tuo hurried over to prevent Kiki from injuring Xiao Xian again. "Haha, long time no see. You've grown taller again. I wonder if your strength has improved?" Kiki patted Xiao Xian's shoulder hard, as if they were brothers. Different from Old Ku, when Old Ku patted, he controlled his strength. Although he was excited, he wouldn't hurt Xiao Xian. But when Kiki patted, Xiao Xian had to use his totem power to resist. Otherwise, he would be the one who got hurt. Before Xiao Xian answered, Kiki continued, "Come on, it's rare for you to come back. Let me see how much you've improved." He hadn't gone out for many days, so his hands were itchy. Recently, he would find someone to practice. Tuo felt a headache. When he was about to pull Kiki away, he heard Xiao Xian say, "Okay." "What?" Tuo opened his eyes wide, looked at Xiao Xian, and shook his head. This guy should refuse. Did he forget that his arm was broken by Kiki? How could he agree? He didn't even hesitate. In the tribe, if both sides agreed, no one could stop them. Tuo could only sigh and step aside to watch. The three of them found a spacious place. Even if they fought fiercely here, not many people would notice. "You first." It was rare for Kiki to have the demeanor of an elder, which was taught by the team leader and Tuo with their fists these years. "Okay." Xiao Xian didn't refuse. He moved his legs and feet. He didn't plan to sneak attack. Instead, he got into a fighting posture and signaled to Kiki that he was going to start. Kiki raised his chin and stood there calmly. He didn't think that Xiao Xian could hurt him. He had absorbed the fire crystal and experienced the killing in the hunting ground. Moreover, he was now an intermediate totem warrior, one of the 30 people who opened up the new route. He thought that he was much stronger than the people at the foot of the mountain, including Xiao Xian. He was here today because he wanted to test Xiao Xian's strength. If Xiao Xian's strength was good enough, they could discuss with Gui He's people and ask them to give them a list of names. Luckily, one of their people was injured when they went out last time. Thinking that he could fight with them again, Kiki was full of energy. He looked at Xiao Xian with urging eyes. Hurry up, so that he could find trouble with them after the fight. Xiao Xian took a deep breath and stomped his feet on the ground, as if a ferocious beast was stomping on the ground. The stones under his feet and the ground around him instantly cracked. Every step he took would bring up a burst of debris and stone powder. If Mai's hunting group were here, they would know that this was not Xiao Xian's usual style. When Xiao Xian was hunting, he focused on speed and dexterity. He would catch his prey by surprise and find the best opportunity to give them a fatal blow. But now, Xiao Xian was showing a straightforward style, rude and strong. Feeling the momentum coming towards him, Kiki was happy. This guy had the style of those big ferocious beasts in the forest, fierce and straightforward. Judging from his appearance, he shouldn't be too far away from Lei. He should be almost an intermediate totem warrior. In 1 or 2 years, he would be able to cross this hurdle. No wonder the shaman always thought highly of him. Thinking of this, Kiki didn't avoid Xiao Xian's fist, but raised his arm in front of his body to block it. He was very confident. The fist and the arm collided, making a crisp sound of muscles colliding. Bang! Under the collision, Kiki's pupils shrank, and he felt a burning pain in his arm. His legs, which had been standing firmly on the ground, became much lighter in an instant. His body, which was firmly rooted to the ground, lost its balance at this moment. He was shaken by this overbearing force and moved back a little. But this little movement made Tuo, who was watching from the side, know that Kiki's situation was not good. Before Kiki had time to be surprised, Xiao Xian had already closed in on him. Because of the totem power, the muscles in his arms swelled and became tighter. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and his arm was instantly raised high and then quickly smashed down. Bang! Under this great force, Kiki could only move back to adjust his body's balance, but his eyes were fixed on Xiao Xian in front of him. How could he change so much? He thought back to the time when he received the order from the team leader to test this kid. What kind of situation was that? Kiki couldn't remember, but vaguely felt that the figure in his impression was not so tall or so strong. He could send him flying with one punch and accidentally broke this guy's arm. Feeling the wind of the fist getting faster and faster, Kiki was a little confused and forgot how to find a chance to fight back. He just held his breath and forcibly resisted Xiao Xian's attack. He always felt that he should be able to resist. How could this guy be so strong? It was impossible. Kiki's body was violently smashed like a rainstorm, and he kept moving back. He moved faster and faster, and with each step, he moved back more and more. The sound of the stones on the ground being stepped on was like a thunder drum, and the gravel flew around. Bang! Crack! The sound of the fist colliding with the arm muscles was heard again, but this time, it was Kiki who was sent flying and heavily hit the ground. Standing next to him, Tuo stared at Xiao Xian in disbelief, and then looked at Kiki who was sent flying. He swallowed his saliva. Moreover, the sound that was heard at the same time as the last punch was, "No way?" Tuo felt a little dizzy. Xiao Xian was panting, looking at Kiki who was sent flying. He moved his shoulders, clenched his fists, opened his 5 fingers, and suddenly clenched them. When he clenched his fists, the bones in his fingers made a crisp sound, but they were full of strength. Because he had just fought against Kiki, who was also a mid-level totem warrior, in a short period of time, his sore muscles were twitching faintly, but the power contained in them was surging. Compared to the time when he was suppressed by Kiki, he felt much better. On the other side, Kiki, who was lying on the ground, was muttering something. He only felt that the muscles in his legs were twitching, especially the arm that took Xiao Xian's fist. His arm bones were definitely broken. Feeling the injuries on his body, Kiki's face was full of disbelief. But soon, Kiki came to himself. Looking at Xiao Xian who was about to turn around and leave, he hurriedly said, Hey, wait, Xian, I'll find you in a few days when I'm better. Let's have another fight. Xiao Xian didn't look back. He waved his hand and continued to walk to the top of the mountain. Not far from where Xiao Xian and Kiki had just fought, Lei stood behind a big stone with a gloomy look. Among the 30 people who had opened up the new route, only one was under the age of 20. Originally, the shaman had reserved it for Xiao Xian, but because Xiao Xian hadn't come back, Lei's grandfather took it away. Now that Xiao Xian had come back, it seemed that he was going to find the shaman. Did he want to take it back? The people of the tower would never let go of this opportunity. No, absolutely not. However, after seeing the fight between Xiao Xian and Kiki, could he beat him? Thinking of this, Lei immediately ran back. He had to tell his grandfather first. Chapter 148. The shaman seemed to have known that Xiao Xian would come up the mountain, so he just sat in the stone house and waited. The guards at the door smiled kindly when they saw Xiao Xian. The shaman is waiting inside. One of them whispered to Xiao Xian. Thank you. Xiao Xian thanked them and walked into the house. Seeing the shaman sitting there, Xiao Xian felt that the shaman was very tired, not physically, but mentally. It seemed that the shaman had aged a lot in the past year. Xiao Xian walked to the low stone table and sat down, asking, "Are you okay?" The shaman nodded with a smile. The wrinkles on his face were deeper because of the changes in his face. Looking at Xiao Xian carefully, the shaman was very pleased. How was the journey? Very good. I learned a lot. I will draw it for you when the time comes. Of course, you have to provide some animal skins and pigments. I don't have them now. Although Xiao Xian had said that he would draw the experience of this journey in the form of a scroll, there were too many things that he had experienced, so it was impossible to draw everything. There were some things that Xiao Xian had to mention to the shaman. As for the eagle that led the way, the high mountain range, the ice field at the top of the mountain, the mysterious eagle mountain, and the strange white insects, Xiao Xian would describe them in detail and draw them on the Wu roll. The shaman listened very carefully. Sometimes he would think about the records passed down by his ancestors. He didn't interrupt and let Xiao Xian talk. He was afraid that he would miss some details if he interrupted. When Xiao Xian finally finished, the shaman was still in a daze. It took a while for him to come back to his senses. The Eagle Mountain really exists. The shaman sighed. When he saw the little bird that Xiao Xian took out, he knew that it would grow into a big bird. Xiao Xian once asked him if he had ever thought about going outside the tribe to find people from other tribes. In fact, the shamans had thought about this for a long time. This was something that every shaman had thought about, but no one had succeeded. When the shaman saw the eagle, he had an idea. He thought, what if one day, the eagle could grow up smoothly and grow big enough to fly over the surrounding obstacles and go to places further away where the warriors of the tribe could not reach? According to the ancestral records, the giant mountain eagles were a race that did not fear the peak of the mountain. When they see a tall mountain, they will not think of avoiding it, but of conquering it. In every hunting ground, there were mountains that the warriors couldn't climb over, blocking their way forward. When they hunted, they would avoid those places. Even the ancestors who opened up the hunting route back then avoided those mountains. Unless they found another route to pass through that mountain, they would go around it. If they couldn't go around it, they would change their route. The others in the tribe didn't know that the ancestors had encountered many obstacles when they were setting up hunting routes. In the end, they had to give up the original route and change it to the current ones. What stopped the warriors were not the bloodthirsty ferocious beasts, but the mountains, the wide rivers, and the dangerous places. But if there was a giant mountain eagle that could fly directly over the mountains, then all the obstacles would be overcome. If the eagle was lucky enough to survive and grow up smoothly, even if the shaman couldn't see it in his lifetime, he would write his thoughts on the animal skin scroll and pass it on to the next shaman, and the one after that, and even the successor of the shaman hundreds of years later. He hoped that they would be able to see the day when they could truly go out. That was why he gave Cha-Cha better protection than Caesar on the first day he saw him. But now, he didn't expect that Xiao Xian could take Cha-Cha to the Eagle Mountain and help Cha-Cha complete the first stage of his growth. Everything seemed to be full of hope. A few years ago, he was very excited about opening up a new route. However, after Xiao Xian mentioned to him about the outside tribes, he felt that compared to going out, whether it was opening up a new route or other things, they were not important. That was why he was so calm when Ta and Gigu were fighting. But he wouldn't tell anyone about this. After all, in the eyes of others, there were many things that were illusory and unreal. As the spiritual leader of the tribe, he couldn't act on impulse when he wasn't absolutely sure. Good. Very good. Xian, next time you come here, bring Cha-Cha with you. The shaman said happily. Yes, next time I'll bring him with me. He has grown so much that he can't fit in the room. Xiao Xian said. When he heard that Cha-Cha had grown so big that he couldn't fit in the room, the shaman smiled so widely that his eyes narrowed. He couldn't wait to call Cha-Cha over and praise him. Xiao Xian looked at the overjoyed shaman and scratched the goosebumps on his arm. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. The shaman was a little emotional now. Should he say that now or find another chance to say it? At his age, he couldn't take it anymore. What, are there other changes? The shaman's smile faded as he asked. This. Well, how far do you think the outside tribes are from us? Xiao Xian asked. The shaman's smile reappeared, full of expectation. As long as Cha-Cha grows strong enough, he can find other tribes. Believe me, that day will come. Then, the shaman became a little disappointed and sighed. But, maybe I won't be able to see that day. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. He only reached into the animal skin bag and took out the stone that the giant eagle had given him. He took it out and placed it on the stone table in front of him. After returning, Xiao Xian carefully cleaned the stone again. This time there was no strange smell. As for the shamaness, when she saw what Xiao Xian had placed on the stone table, she sighed and froze. The shaman seemed to be frozen. He maintained his posture, and even his expression was frozen. Only his eyes were fixed on the palm-sized flat stone that Xiao Xian had placed on the stone table. Gurgle, gurgle. The shaman wanted to say something, but he only made some meaningless sounds, as if there was something stuck in his throat. Hey, are you okay? Calm down a little. Take a deep breath, inhale. Xiao Xian was frightened when he saw the shaman like this. He waved his hand in front of the shaman's eyes and quickly patted his back. Take a deep breath like this, huff. Xiao Xian, who was standing in front of the shaman, was pushed to the side by the shaman. The shaman's whole body was trembling. When he raised his hand and reached for the stone, his hand was shaking so hard that if he was holding a ladle of soup, the soup would be gone. Seeing that the shaman had finally calmed down, Xiao Xian sat back down. I didn't finish. This stone was given to me by a very large eagle. It almost vomited all over me. Xiao Xian told the shaman what had happened at that time, how he found the pattern on the eagle's foot and how he fed it. The shaman treated the stone as if it was an extremely precious and fragile object. He carefully touched the stone and listened to Xiao Xian's story without missing a single word. After Xiao Xian finished, the shaman picked up the stone with the pattern on it and carefully looked at the picture on it. The picture looked like a rolling cloud. The shaman searched his memory and said with a trembling voice due to excitement, I remember this picture was in the ancestors' animal skin scroll. Wait, I'll go look through it. Xiao Xian only felt a gust of wind blow in front of him, and the shaman disappeared. Soon, the shaman returned, took the stone from the stone table, and left again. Looking around, Xiao Xian got up and poured himself a cup of water. He slowly drank and waited. Halfway through, when the people outside came in to change the tea for the shaman, they saw Xiao Xian sitting there peacefully and their faces twitched. Xiao Xian was probably the first person who could drink tea in the shaman's place. Even if they were the two team leaders, they would still be subconsciously restrained here. After about half an hour, the shaman came back like a gust of wind and called Xiao Xian, "Follow me, we're going to find Xing." Xiao Xian knew who the Xing the shaman was talking about. When he came here in the past, he saw Xing a few times. That person was older than the shaman, and it was said that many of his ancestors had been leaders and shaman. His words had more weight in the tribe, and when there were important matters to discuss, he would be called over. However, that old man didn't seem to be easy to talk to. Xiao Xian remembered that the old man's gaze was not good. It was like a knife, as if he couldn't wait to cut him a few times. The shaman took Xiao Xian out of the stone house and went to another place on the mountain. At this time, there were many people chatting outside. As they were talking, they saw the shaman quickly move his old legs and whiz past them. They didn't even have time to salute. "That's the shaman?" a warrior said. "It seems so. What happened? Why is the shaman so anxious? Didn't you see who was following behind the shaman?" They seemed to be heading towards Lei's house. Lei's grandfather is Xing. At this, a few people had an "I understand" look on their faces. It seemed that the shaman was going to fight for a spot with Xiao Xian. In Gigu's hunting team, although he was the team leader, he would often listen to Xing's opinions. If the shaman asked for a spot for Xiao Xian, it was unknown if Xing would agree. As for adding another person, that was even more impossible. Back then, when he swore to the fire seed by the fire pit, he said that there would only be 30 people. There wouldn't be one more person, and there wouldn't be one less. At this moment, Xing was sitting in the house with his eyes half closed, deep in thought. Xing's father had once told him earnestly, "You have to have a long-term vision. Don't just look at the people around you." Therefore, Xing felt that it was too monotonous for his descendants to be limited to the original hunting route. If they were going to do something, they should do something big. Opening up a new hunting route would be a glory that no one, other than their ancestors, could achieve in hundreds of years. This kind of glory would naturally be shared by his own people. As for the others, he didn't care. Thinking about what Lei had said when he came back, Xing snorted heavily. Why would the shaman treat the people on the mountain badly for a kid from the foot of the mountain? As he was thinking, the shaman had already brought Xiao Xian over. Because it was the shaman, no one in the family dared to stop him. Although he was older than the shaman and had a higher status in the tribe, he still had to respect the shaman. Xing stood up and bowed to the shaman. As for Xiao Xian, who was beside the shaman, he pretended not to see him. "Xian, close the door," the shaman said to Xiao Xian, who was behind him. Xing's room was different from the others, who only used animal skin or grass curtains. Instead, there was a wooden plank. Xiao Xian pulled the plank horizontally, blocking the view of the people outside the room. Seeing the shaman like this, Xing was also angry. He was about to say something when he saw the shaman carefully place the item in his hand on the table beside him. All of Xing's anger, all of his words, was replaced by another emotion the moment he saw this stone. The muscles on his face were twisted, probably because his emotions were too complicated and he was too agitated. Xiao Xian felt the goosebumps on his arms increase. Chapter 149. Xiao Xian knew that tribesmen would be very curious about things from other tribes. However, for someone like Xing, who always had a serious expression on his face, it was hard to believe that he would be so excited. Xing's nostrils flared and his nostrils flared. His breathing became hurried, each breath heavier than the last. His old face was flushed red. This is... Xing carefully picked up the stone and examined it carefully. At his age, whether it was hunting or crafting stone tools, he had more experience than most people in the tribe. Naturally, he could tell that this stone had not been crafted for too long. Perhaps it was only a few years, or at most a dozen years. However, if this stone was not left behind by the ancestors, then where did it come from? Thinking of how the shamaness rushed over, if it was just for a kid from the foot of the mountain, it really shouldn't be. Then, the shamaness' main purpose was naturally this stone. Thinking of this, Xing no longer cared about the 30 spots, the opening of a new route, or the competition between the two sides. The only thing he wanted to know now was the origin of this stone. The shamaness sat there, not as anxious as before. Although her breathing was still a little unstable, and the hand holding the walking stick was still trembling, her face had already returned to her usual calm and profound self. "This is the reason why I came," the shamaness said. Just as Xing subconsciously leaned towards the shamaness, pricking up his ears to listen carefully, the shamaness said slowly with a slightly trembling voice, "Xian, tell Lao Xing, how did you get this stone?" Xing was stunned, his eyes widening as he looked at Xiao Xian. The shamaness' words had stunned him. What, this stone was obtained by Xian? Where did he get it from? No, this kid had disappeared for almost a year. You, hurry up and tell me. In front of Xiao Xian, Xing's tone was not as pleasant. He couldn't control his impatience, and his usual style of speaking made it sound like he was interrogating someone. His eyes were like two sharp knives, itching to stab you in the face. However, Xiao Xian did not mind Xing's tone. With the shamaness here, Xing could not do anything to him. It's like this, Xiao Xian briefly explained the origins of the stone. Seeing how anxious Xing was, he skipped a lot of details and only emphasized how he obtained the stone. Hui. It's the Hui tribe. Xing's eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the shaman and said, "You came here to confirm it, right?" The shaman nodded. "So, I hope you can take that thing out and let me have a look." Taking in a deep breath, Xing carefully placed the stone in his handbag, as though he was dealing with a fragile object. Every single movement he made was done with extreme caution. He controlled his strength, fearing that he might accidentally break a corner of the stone. If the members of the Xing clan were to know that the usually resolute and domineering Xing had such a gentle attitude, their jaws would probably drop in shock. Xing's room was about 20 square meters. Aside from a stone table, a few wooden chairs, and a bed, there was also an especially large stone vat with boxes of various sizes inside. Half kneeling on the ground, Xing opened the stone vat and reached out with both hands to take out a stone box. Just like before, he was also very careful. Every single movement seemed to have been carefully thought out. Xiao Xian also noticed that when Xing looked at the stone box, his eyes were filled with reverence. His emotions were very passionate. His originally sharp gaze was now focused on the stone box, as though everything around him was nothing. Carefully placing the stone box on the table, Xing opened it. Xiao Xian stretched his neck to take a look. Inside there was another box. Between the big and small boxes there were some wood shavings. Obviously, they were there to act as a buffer. Xing took out the small box and carefully wiped away the wood shavings on the outside. His gentleness was completely different from the way he usually beat someone up. He opened the lid. Inside there were also some wood shavings. In the middle, there was something wrapped in thick beast skin. Xiao Xian had hunted for so long, so he could naturally tell the quality of this beast skin. It was the beast skin of a high-grade beast. Generally, the beast skin of a high-grade beast was very hard, but there were also soft parts. It was just that it was relatively rare. High-quality stone, special wood shavings, and this rare beast skin were all used to protect the thing inside. This made Xiao Xian even more curious as he stared at Xing's actions. Xing carefully and attentively carried the item out of the bag. He opened the animal skin and the item inside was immediately presented to Xiao Xian's eyes. Xiao Xian stared at the table. The thing that Xing and the shaman were eagerly looking at like an extremely precious treasure. He blinked again, and looked over again. Xiao Xian didn't know what kind of expression he should show to express his current feelings. He only felt a group of forest raccoons running over and over again in his heart. Before this, based on the shaman and Xing's attitudes, and based on what they said, he deduced that Xing might have something from an external tribe, and that it was extremely precious. Hence, Xiao Xian thought that it was probably a rare treasure. For example, the ice blocks he saw in the mountains near Eagle Mountain, or the skin and silk of white worms, or fire crystals. Or even something more rugged, like a part of a high-grade beast, which the tribesmen loved to treasure. But he didn't expect to see something so unexpected. The thing that Xing was carefully treating was a clay pot, and it was a colored pottery. There were some drawings on the pot, and the style was similar to the drawings on the stone he brought back. Every stroke was curled like a whirlpool. Seeing Xiao Xian staring blankly at the pot on the table, Xing couldn't help but smile. "You've never seen it before, right?" Xing smiled proudly. Xiao Xian, dumbfounded. Xing continued to smile proudly. "Xiao Xian, this is a treasure passed down from my ancestors. It comes from an external tribe, and it's not made of stone." Xing felt that Xiao Xian, this kid from the foot of the mountain, was ignorant. He probably didn't know how precious this pot was, because until now, the tribe had never successfully made a single piece of pottery. Even if they had the animal skin scroll passed down from their ancestors, they had never succeeded. Later on, the items left behind from thousands of years ago naturally became priceless treasures of the tribe. They carried too many unspeakable secrets of the tribe, and the families who kept these pots naturally developed a sense of superiority. Although these pots were very fragile, and although they didn't bring much strength to the totemic warriors, even if others took out the most powerful beast, they wouldn't trade it away. Like that family, they also have a treasure passed down from their ancestors. It's also a pot, but it's a pity that their pot doesn't have any drawings on it. It's very ugly, and when it's placed next to mine, it's like the difference between a weak herbivore and a fierce carnivore. Xing continued. In the hearts of the tribesmen, those weak and herbivorous animals were all cowards, and they looked down on them. However, those ferocious and bloodthirsty carnivorous beasts were different. They were the strong, the true strong of the forest. They would always look up to the strong. Xiao Xian. This old man was so proud that his tail was wagging. No matter how serious he was, he couldn't hide the smug smile on his old face, making people want to punch him. No wonder when he listened to the gossip of the tribe's upper echelons, he always heard Xing arguing with the other old men. Other than the way they did things, it was probably because of this pot. This was a sense of superiority. Xiao Xian opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. This was probably the difference between non-indigenous people and indigenous people. Xiao Xian observed the pot. The drawings on the pot had a natural element to them. Those simple lines were like clouds and wind. Other than that, there was also a human face, but every stroke was drawn with swirling lines, giving it a sense of exaggeration. The painter consciously changed the patterns of the human face. The colors of the lines were red, brown, and decorated the pot in a painting style. To the tribesmen, this wasn't just a form of beauty. More importantly, these drawings also contained the totem images of the tribe's witchcraft rituals, giving people a sense of wonder. This was also the symbol of the tribe. Looking at the drawings with this style, one would know which tribe it was produced by. Just now, Xing had said that this was produced by the Hui tribe. Then, back then, did the ancestors of the tribe have any relations with the Hui tribe? The shamaness looked at Xing, who was talking non-stop, and shook her head with a bitter smile. Whenever they talked about the pot, Xing would always be like this, completely different from his usual self. After talking for a while, seeing that the other two didn't respond, Xing thought of the stone Xiao Xian took out and shut his mouth. Then, thinking of the patterns on the stone, Xing carefully picked up the pot and let Xiao Xian and the shamaness see the patterns on the bottom of the pot. It was exactly the same as the pattern on the stone. This should be the Hui tribe. Xing said. In the past, he had always thought that the other tribes that the ancestors talked about were too far away from the tribe, so far that it would be hard to meet one even in thousands of years. Other than the old objects left behind by the ancestors, there were no other new things from the other tribes. He didn't expect to see one today. Didn't this mean that in his lifetime, he would be able to see things from other tribes like the Hui tribe or people? Thinking about it, Xing couldn't help but feel excited. He looked at the shamaness fervently, wanting to get a definite answer from her. At least, he had some hope. The shamaness was the wisest person in the tribe. If there was anyone who could solve this big problem, other than the shamaness, Xing couldn't think of anyone else. I have an idea. The shamaness told Xing about her idea of flying out of the tribe through the cha-cha. Listening to the shamaness seriously, Xing couldn't help but nod. That's right, there are indeed many obstacles in the forest. If we could fly over, that would be great. Xiao Xian listened to the discussion between the shamaness and Xing and interrupted. Actually, we can try to fly over from that big river. The two who were thinking about how to fly over the mountains and swamps looked at Xiao Xian at the same time. Chapter 150. Xiao Xian scratched his head as the two stared at him. Actually, I've been paying attention to that river for a long time. You want Cha-Cha to fly across? The shaman shook his head. That river should be very wide. Cha-Cha wouldn't have a place to rest along the way. Moreover, there are river beasts in the river. Even after 2 more stages of growth, Cha-Cha might not be able to fly across. Flying without food or water, the chances of success were too low. Xing also gave Xiao Xian a look that said, young people are indeed simple-minded. No, it's not just Cha-Cha's flight. I want to build a boat. A simple canoe will do. There are many giant trees in the forest. It won't be difficult. Xiao Xian said. Boat? I've seen this term in the animal skin scroll left behind by my ancestors. I also know about raft. However, Xian, the trees in the river will sink very quickly. There are wood-eating river beasts in the river. The shaman frowned. Although he rarely went to the river, he had heard many things about it. If they were to build a boat, it would disappear not long after it entered the river. Most of the time, that's the case. However, during the rainy season, those wood-eating worms will leave for a period of time like the river beasts. They will only return when the 2 moons overlap. What? Is what you said true? Not only the shaman, even Xing, who thought Xiao Xian was dreaming, couldn't help but stand up and ask. If what Xiao Xian said was true, they could really give it a try. Xiao Xian told them about his discoveries in the past few years. Of course, everything was just a guess. However, Xiao Xian knew that as long as there was a glimmer of hope, the shaman would give it a try. After Xiao Xian finished, the shaman and Xing fell silent. Each of them pondered and analyzed the feasibility of Xiao Xian's idea. After a while, Xing spoke first. If that's the case, we can give it a try. If Xian can't do it, this old man can go personally. The shaman raised his eyelids and looked at Xing. Do you think Cha-Cha will listen to you? Xing was speechless. Although he hadn't come into contact with the eagle, he had heard from his grandson and others that the eagle's temper wasn't very good. Other than Xian, it wouldn't listen to anyone else. Even without it, I can still use that ship. Xing spoke, but he wasn't confident enough. He also knew that his words weren't true and the feasibility of it was too low. It was a method that would only cause them to lose their lives for nothing. How about this, Xian? Wait until next year's rainy season. You can take a look. After waiting for so many years, a few more years won't hurt. You have to make more preparations. As for this matter, don't tell anyone for the time being, the shaman said. The last sentence was said while looking at Xing. I know. Xing looked at the engraved pot on the table, and then at the stone beside it. He added, if there's anything you need me to do, just let me know. Although Xing still didn't look at Xiao Xian in a good light, the fact that he could express his opinion on this matter meant that Xing and the shaman had the same thoughts. Getting out of this place was the most important thing. As for opening up a new hunting route, that was secondary. This was an obsession that had been passed down from their ancestors. Since the matter had been explained, the shaman took back the stone and left with Xiao Xian. When the shaman took back the stone, Xing's eyes were glued to it. If the one holding the stone was Xiao Xian, Xing would probably snatch it right away. What a strange thought! Xiao Xian followed behind the shaman, thinking about Xing's reaction. But then he changed his mind and laughed. Perhaps, to the people in the tribe, his own thoughts were the strangest. After the shaman left with Xiao Xian, Xing looked at the engraved pot and gently caressed it. He cried and laughed at the same time. His old face was filled with tears. After a while, when Xing's emotions had calmed down, he carefully kept the pot and opened the window. He was lost in thought as he looked out of the window. Outside the window, it was pitch black. Winter was coming. The darkest time of the year was coming. However, he didn't feel as depressed as before. He always felt that there was an intense emotion that was about to break through and explode out. The fire in the house burned and the wood crackled. Xing sat back on the wooden chair, recalling what Xiao Xian said over and over again. Feeling that it wasn't enough, he took out a piece of animal skin and recorded everything he remembered. Knock, knock, knock. Someone knocked on the wooden door of Xing's room. After the shaman and Xiao Xian left, Xing closed the door again. Everyone in the family knew that once the door was closed, it meant that the old man didn't want to be disturbed. If there was something, they had to knock on the wooden plank to get permission to enter. If they entered without permission, the old man would go crazy. The consequences of the old man's anger were very serious. No one wanted to provoke Xing. Just like when the shaman went in and closed the door, everyone in the family left the house on their own accord. They didn't want to eavesdrop. They only came back after the shaman and Xiao Xian left. "Grandfather?" Lei was standing outside the door. "Come in," Xing said. Lei moved the wooden plank and walked in. Just as he was about to say something, he noticed that Xing was acting strangely. However, he didn't dare to ask. After thinking for a while, he asked the question that he wanted to ask. "Grandfather, did the shaman want to let Xian join the 30 people?" Xing didn't answer. Lei didn't know what his grandfather meant. After waiting for a while, he looked over and saw that his grandfather was in a daze, staring at the fire. He didn't know what his grandfather was thinking about. This was too unbelievable. His grandfather was actually in a daze. Why don't I ask again? When he thought of fighting for a spot, Xing took out a piece of fire crystal that he had been keeping for a long time. He wanted Lei to improve a little and join the team that opened up the new route. This meant that the old man's thoughts were leaning towards his side. Lei thought. Gathering his courage, Lei asked again, "Grandfather, does the shaman want Xian to join the team that opened up the new route?" This time, Xing had a reaction. Let Xian join the team that opened up the new route? Definitely not. Xing suddenly became agitated. "That's right. If you want to give it to someone, you should give it to someone on our side." Lei agreed. However, before Lei could finish his disdainful words about Xiao Xian, he heard his grandfather say, "Opening up the new route is too dangerous. If Xian goes in, he might be injured or killed by a fearsome beast. What should we do then?" "Definitely not. He can't be injured and he can't die." Lei. "Grandfather, the grandson that you personally recommended to join the hunting team that opened up the new route is still standing in front of you." Xing didn't see the struggle on Lei's face. Even if he did, he wouldn't care. What he was thinking now was what to do. After the conversation just now, he didn't want Xian to go out with the hunting team, not to mention opening up a new route that was even more dangerous. Don't let Xian join the hunting team? However, if he didn't have enough training, when he left in the future, he would have to face more unknown factors and more severe challenges. When that time comes, if he didn't have enough ability to protect himself, how could he succeed? However, if he was eaten by a fearsome beast before he could even take action, what a headache! This was the first time Xing felt so conflicted. He was in a dilemma. Lei looked at his grandfather pulling at his beard with a bitter face. He didn't even realize that he had pulled out a few strands. After thinking for a while, Lei asked tentatively, "Then why did the shaman bring Xian here?" Xing had already come back to his senses. Hearing Lei's question, he didn't explain. Instead, like his father and grandfather, he said earnestly, "I told you before, you need to have a long-term vision." Lei lowered his eyelids and thought to himself, "You always mean different things when you say long-term vision." In the end, Lei still couldn't get an answer from Xing. Instead, he was chased out by Xing with a glare. In the dark night, the night swallow at the foot of the mountain flew in the air. In the middle of the night, everything quieted down. The temperature dropped sharply. The wind carried snow and ice, wreaking havoc on the land. This was an unusual winter. In this winter, the shaman didn't take care of other things. He handed it over to the other assistants and asked Guizhe to start training. Every time Xiao Xian went up the mountain to look for the shaman, Xing would brave the wind and snow to run over. He wanted to hear more about the progress of the plan. At first, it was only the shaman and Xing. Later, the shaman told Chief Ao. As the chief, Ao had the right to know about this plan. Later, the few elders in the tribe who had some authority heard about this news. Hence, the moment Xiao Xian went up the mountain, the elders and the chief all ran to the shaman. However, they didn't want to tell the two team leaders about this because the two team leaders had to focus on opening up a new route. It wouldn't be good if they were distracted. Because of this, the two team leaders were very depressed. They always felt that they were outside the core of the tribe. No matter which camp these elders belonged to, no matter what they thought of Xiao Xian, after knowing about the plan of the shaman and Xiao Xian, they all made the same decision. For the sake of the shaman and Xiao Xian's plan, they would do their best to help. No. They didn't have much time left. Compared to the young men who had more time, they hoped that before they died, they would know whether this plan was successful or not. That was enough. As for walking out of this place, it was an extravagant hope for them. Humans shouldn't be too greedy. Just like the ferocious beasts in the forest, sometimes they didn't know how to be content. Instead, they would lose their lives in vain. However, some people always had this extravagant hope. They thought that perhaps one day, they would be able to walk to the place in the stories told by their ancestors and see other humans besides their own tribe members. When winter ended and the earth warmed up, the tribe became lively again. When they were preparing for the sacrificial ceremony, Xiao Xian was chosen to dance again. This made many people unhappy, especially the young warriors. In the past, when Xiao Xian found the fire crystals and was chosen, they didn't have any objections. However, Xiao Xian hadn't been in the tribe for the past year. What merit did he have? However, they found that no matter how dissatisfied they were, even if they complained to the elders who were in the opposite camp, they only got one sentence. He deserves it. The two team leaders also had a headache. Recently, there were always people coming to them to talk about Xiao Xian, but they really didn't know. When they went to the shaman, the chief, or the other elders, they only got one sentence. Don't think about other things. Continue to open up new routes. Chapter 151. The tribe looked the same as before, but upon closer inspection, it wasn't hard to notice that many changes were happening quietly. Then, when everyone gathered together to discuss, they realized that there were so many situations that were different from the past. For example, there were always a few old figures walking back and forth by the river in front of the tribe. Not only them, but even the chief often wandered by the river, which made the people living in the mountain foot area very curious. Even if they were not catching fish, they would go to the river from time to time. Gradually, they formed a habit of going to the river when they had nothing to do. Maybe they could meet a senior leader of the tribe and talk about life. And the people in the mountain also found that those bad-tempered old men were very nice to Xiao Xian. They couldn't believe it. Later, even the two team leaders looked at Xiao Xian with strange eyes. There was another thing that puzzled everyone. During the rainy season, several important people on the mountain actually braved the rain and ran to the river every day. This was something that had never happened before. The words passed down from generation to generation made the warriors in the tribe afraid of the river. In recent years, the situation became a little better after fishing, but it was not enough to make those important people in the mountain come to see it, right? Those who were confused continued to be confused, and those who were looking forward to it continued to look forward to it. It was another rainy season. In this year, Xiao Xian's body was 16 years old. After the ceremony, several important people in the mountain began to lose sleep every day. They were nervous and excited, and gathered together to discuss whether the plan needed to be changed. Looking for wood, building boats, making sails, and so on, a series of movements could not be hidden from too many people. During this year's ceremony, the shaman told them about Xiao Xian's sailing. This news made the whole tribe talk about it for a long time, and it did not stop until the rainy season. Xiao Xian was often stopped by people, asking all kinds of questions about the trip. Everyone in the tribe had a strong sense of expectation. Although they did not understand a lot of what the shaman said, it did not mean that they were not looking forward to it. During the rainy season, torrential rain descended. The river overlords roared as they headed downstream in groups. Those wood-eating bugs also gradually left. Most of the creatures in the river followed the giant beasts downstream. When the two moons met again, they would return from the sea. There were also some that, like the frogs, appeared for a period of time, then went to other places that no one knew of and disappeared. This time, Xiao Xian planned to use the time between the end of the rainy season and the reunion of the two moons to sail the boat. At the end of the rainy season, everyone in the tribe, from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain, from the elderly to the children, put down other things at hand and gathered beside the path of glory. Move it out. The shaman stood at the top of the mountain and said. Ao and the two team leaders, as well as a few able-bodied warriors, carefully moved the canoe out of the wooden shed. The canoe was nearly 3 meters wide at its widest point and 10 meters long. It was shaped like a shuttle. The reason why it was so big was to make it easier for Cha-Cha to rest inside. If it was only Xiao Xian, there would be no need for such a big canoe. Xiao Xian had to choose the type of tree that was used to make the canoe. The hunting team had gone out to find all kinds of samples, and brought them back for Xiao Xian to choose. After Xiao Xian had made his choice, Ao and the others went to cut down the best tree and brought it back. The canoe was made by Xiao Xian and several of the tribe's top stoneware craftsmen, including Old Ku. They hollowed out the middle of the tree they had cut down, and made a large and nimble canoe. The canoe was relatively simple to make, and there was no risk of it falling apart. The blueprint was also drawn by Xiao Xian himself. When he was drawing, he also consulted the other old warriors in the tribe. Maybe they didn't know anything about canoes, but they knew some useful technique. Xiao Xian then made some changes based on their suggestions. After the blueprint was finished, the stoneware craftsmen went to cut down a lot of wood to practice at home. After all, there was a big difference between wood and stoneware, so they didn't dare to do anything rashly. When they were confident and got the hang of it, they would come back to finish the canoe together. This canoe wasn't that heavy for many totem warriors in the tribe. Normally, they could even carry stones, so how hard would it be for them to carry wood? But at this moment, it was carried by several senior totem warriors, and they would carry it down the mountain later. This was a kind of respect, a kind of solemn etiquette. Xiao Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. The shaman was drawing patterns on his face, just like the warriors who went out to hunt. It was a kind of blessing, which meant that the tribe attached great importance to this. Even Cha-Cha's feet were drawn by the shaman with the tribe's totem, imitating the giant eagle at Eagle Mountain. After finishing the drawing, Xiao Xian bowed towards the fire pit, and then walked to the canoe. Together with the others carrying the canoe, they walked down the path of glory. Cha-Cha directly flew up into the air and flew over. Behind the canoe, the shaman and the other elders of the tribe followed. Some of them were excited, some were worried, and some looked calm, but the twitching of their muscles showed that they weren't. At this time, many people were easily overthinking, worrying about their gains and losses. This was related to the ancestors' wishes, so how could they be calm? Beside the path of glory, the crowd followed the canoe. Adults with children, disabled people with crutches or supported by others, followed closely. Everyone sang the hunting song and the prayer song. At first, only the people on the mountain sang, but soon, the people at the foot of the mountain sang as well. The whole tribe sang the same song with the same rhythm and pace. Some were young, some were old, some were sharp, and some were rough. To them, singing represented everything they were feeling at the moment. Most of the people in the tribe weren't good at expressing their emotions and thoughts. Singing was a form of expression. This was the first time they sang the hunting song, without the impatient killing intent before the hunt. Instead, they sang with fearlessness, without fear, and with hope. On this day, the whole tribe collectively sent Xiao Xian off. What was on the other side of the river? They didn't know, and they never thought of finding out. In many people's eyes, Xiao Xian's actions were worthy of respect, but they didn't think that Xiao Xian could safely cross the river. This river was too dangerous. What a brave warrior! After the canoe was transported down the mountain, Ao and the others carefully pushed it into the river. The canoe that was made was classified as a side canoe. The so-called side canoe was a canoe that was attached to one side or both sides of the canoe, and was shaped like a boat that was floating in the same direction as the canoe. Xiao Xian's design was a side canoe. Because of this, he once played with it when he was traveling abroad. The side canoe overcame the instability of the canoe that was prone to sway sideways and capsizing in the wind and waves. It also possessed the advantages of the canoe's lightness and structural integrity. It was also a tool used by the Aboriginals for ocean voyaging. The sail was also the most important part of the boat. Now, it was set up with a sail made of leaves and vines. The vines were thin but very strong vines found in the hunting grounds. The best women in the tribe weaved them into an inverted triangular sail. In the eyes of the shamaness and the others, they didn't know if this kind of material would be useful, so it was best to prepare more. But because the vines were hard to find, in the end, they only managed to weave 2 pieces. One piece was installed, and the other piece was used as a backup. They didn't know if a backup piece would be enough. When Xiao Xian was learning from the Aborigines, he learned that the side canoe could travel more than 200 kilometers a day. But here, Xiao Xian wasn't so sure. After connecting the side canoe with the side canoe, Xiao Xian checked every place and the things he needed to bring. Xiao Xian stood in the canoe and looked at the densely packed people on the shore. Caesar carried Old Ku and also stood on the shore. He looked at Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha who landed in the canoe. He also wanted to follow, but Xiao Xian couldn't bring him along. If there was any danger on the river, Xiao Xian could let Cha-Cha carry him. But Caesar couldn't and Cha-Cha couldn't carry him. If Cha-Cha was about the same size as the giant eagles in Eagle Mountain, he could carry many people. Unfortunately, Cha-Cha was still small. Goodbye. I'm leaving. Xiao Xian bowed to the people on the shore. Under the leadership of the shamaness and the chief, the people on the shore also bowed to Xiao Xian. This was a situation that had never happened in thousands of years. To the people of the tribe, Xiao Xian was their hope to leave this place. If Xiao Xian didn't succeed, then no one knew how long it would take for them to leave this place. Maybe even after 1,000 years, they would still be stuck in the same place. With a pull of the sail, the canoe sailed away with the wind. The sail was very big. If it weren't for the totemic warrior's great strength, Xiao Xian might not be able to operate it. Cha-Cha, the big guy, stood in the canoe and looked around curiously. To him, this was a very novel experience. He could actually stand on the river. However, such a big boat was still too small for Cha-Cha. After standing for a while, he flew up to the sky and flew in the direction Xiao Xian pointed. He still had more freedom in the sky. When he was tired of flying, he would return to the boat to rest. On the shore, the prayer song sounded. It was a collective chorus. Xiao Xian looked back and saw that the people on the shore were getting smaller and smaller. The house on the mountain gradually became a blurry dot. The mountain that he had lived in for nearly 8 years was gradually disappearing at the point where the water met the sky, just like the riverbank. Besides the sound of the wind, there was no other sound. Looking at the direction of the sun in the sky and feeling the slight change in the wind, Xiao Xian adjusted the sail and looked ahead. Chapter 152. Sailing on the river was very boring, but they had to be vigilant at all times to prevent anything from jumping out of the water. They also had to pay attention to the direction of the wind, so they didn't have to go back after traveling for half a day. From the end of the rainy season, the day they set off, until the 2 moons coincided, Xiao Xian calculated that there was less than 30 days of safe time. Xiao Xian didn't know how wide the river was, so he could only try his best to go forward. If he still couldn't see the situation on the other side of the river after 15 days, then he could only turn back. Otherwise, the river level would drop rapidly and eventually fall into a bottomless abyss. At that time, even if he wanted to fly, he wouldn't be able to. The piranhas in the river were very active. Without the suppression of other giant beasts, from time to time, some energetic fish would jump out of the water and bite each other. At first, there were only some small piranhas near the tribal river, but as they sailed, Xiao Xian saw many larger piranhas jump out of the water. A piranha nearly 4 meters long suddenly jumped out of the water, jumping high from one side of the canoe to the other. As it jumped, it opened its mouth wide. Before, when there were piranhas that jumped out, Xiao Xian only avoided them and didn't attack. But now, the target of this one was obviously Xiao Xian. He controlled the sail with one hand, making it avoid the big fish's path. At the same time, the tip of his foot picked up a wooden stick next to him. After catching it with his free hand, he directly hit the fish's body. The friction between the stick and the air made a whooshing sound. He didn't use a spear, but a hard wooden stick. He hit the fish hard, but he couldn't immediately make it bleed. If blood splashed, the surrounding piranhas would be attracted. At that time, Xiao Xian's hands wouldn't be able to handle it. But a few fish scales were whipped out, and the piranha that was hit by the stick fell back into the water. Before it could find a target for revenge, it was surrounded by other piranhas. On its body, where it was whipped by the wooden stick, where the scales fell off, there were traces of blood slowly oozing out. These blood vessels were like stimulants, stimulating the energetic piranhas around them. After whipping away the piranha, Xiao Xian put away the sail. At the same time, Cha-Cha, who was in the air, flew down, grabbed a rope, and flew up again. The other end of the rope was tied to the canoe, and Cha-Cha pulled the canoe, quickly moving it away from the bloody river. The current wind direction was not suitable for using sails, so Xiao Xian kept the sails and let Cha-Cha continue pulling. When it was tired, it would return to the canoe to rest and use the wind and the sails to continue forward. Sometimes, in addition to these piranhas of different sizes, there were other fish, but those fish were only active in the water and would not jump up to cause trouble. However, if someone went into the water, it would be hard to say. As Xiao Xian was controlling the sail, he saw a fish that was much longer than the canoe slowly swimming past them. Because it was close to the surface of the river, the patterns on the fish's body could be clearly seen. Part of its spiked fins could also be seen. There were many such fish, but as long as these fish did not attack the canoe, it did not matter. Earlier, there was a big fish, probably curious about the canoe, that used its head to hit the canoe, nearly capsizing the canoe. Xiao Xian had Cha-Cha quickly pull the canoe away, but the fish did not give up, continuing to hit the canoe until Xiao Xian had Cha-Cha stop and let the fish hit the canoe a few times. Finally, the fish felt bored and left. Fish had all kinds of habits. They had to travel during the day, so they could not sleep at night. Cha-Cha stood inside the canoe to rest, while Xiao Xian had to adjust the sail after a short nap. He also had to maintain vigilance. Although it was difficult, and there would be problems every day, they were all small problems that could be solved. Xiao Xian counted the number of days and roughly estimated the distance they had traveled. It had been 8 days, but they still did not see the riverbank, nor did they see any small islands or other places that protruded from the surface of the river. All they could see was the river water. He took out the roasted meat jerky from the animal skin bag and ate some. He also drank the water on the boat sparingly. Before he finished drinking the water, Xiao Xian would not drink water from the river. Cha-Cha ate in the air. Sometimes, when it caught a fish, it would directly fly in the air, a little further away from the canoe. This way, the dripping blood would not cause any trouble for the canoe. While eating, Xiao Xian suddenly found a small island that protruded from the surface of the river diagonally ahead. He quickly adjusted the sail and headed there. However, as he got closer, Xiao Xian discovered that it was not a small island, but a huge fish. It was just that this fish was already dead and was floating on the surface of the water. Moreover, Xiao Xian also discovered that there were many holes in the fish's body, which were bitten through. The fish, which was more than 20 meters long, was eaten until only its skeleton and a layer of incomplete skin was left. Xiao Xian could also see from the bitten holes that there were still things inside the fish's body that were still gnawing. There were some small fish inside with slender bodies. Looking at them alone, they were not conspicuous. But it was these small fish, which were not even as big as a palm, that gnawed this huge fish with sharp teeth and thick armor on its body until only its skeleton was left. Perhaps, after a while, even the bones and the skin full of holes would be gone. Xiao Xian quickly adjusted the sail and left this place. He also gestured to Cha-Cha, who had just finished eating in the air, to come down and see the fate of this huge beast. Be careful when you catch fish in the future. If you find these small fish, quickly throw them away. Xiao Xian said. When Cha-Cha saw the fate of the big fish, it shook its wings. It probably did not expect such a situation. After the canoe sailed a distance away, Xiao Xian looked back and saw that the big fish that was originally floating on the surface of the water was sinking. It was almost completely eaten. Perhaps, sometimes, those ferocious and huge fish were not the biggest threat to people sailing on the water. Those inconspicuous fish were more likely to cause danger. Xiao Xian thought that Cha-Cha would rest for a while before continuing to fly into the air to pull the canoe. Unexpectedly, Cha-Cha stood on the canoe like a quail, crouching there with its neck shrunk. Its head was looking up at the sky, as if there was something in the sky that it was afraid of. What's wrong? Xiao Xian asked as he tapped Cha-Cha's bird head. He did not see anything in the sky, but he felt a great pressure in his heart. Cha-Cha called out softly, but its neck shrunk even tighter. Its eyes were still staring at the sky, but it did not fly up. The canoe gradually came to a stop. The wind that was blowing the sails had also stopped. Xiao Xian looked at the sky. He soon realized that the clouds in the sky had dispersed, revealing a large empty area. It was really developing towards a cloudless sky. If it was any other day, this would indeed be considered a sunny day. But here, it gave people a feeling of great pressure and fear. Not only Cha-Cha, but Xiao Xian also felt a sense of trembling, not daring to move. However, the current situation had to be resolved. The number of piranhas in the surroundings seemed to have decreased by a lot. Even the large fish that swam by from time to time could not be seen. It was really calm. But this calm phenomenon was too strange. A scene suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Xian's eyes. A large amount of fog was rising from the river. The fog looked very ordinary, with a sense of boundless fog. However, to be able to use this method to warn Xiao Xian, it was definitely not something ordinary. Xiao Xian took out the long-handled paddles from the canoe and began to row vigorously. "What are you still doing there? Hurry up and help. Otherwise we will all die," Xiao Xian said to Cha-Cha. Cha-Cha looked at the sky, grabbed the two long-handled paddles beside him, turned over, and began to row using the method that he had practiced many times in the tribe. With Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha's vigorous paddling, the canoe began to move quickly. Xiao Xian did not care about anything else. He only held back his strength and rowed with all his might. He did not even worry that the splashes would attract the attention of the other big fish. With the sound of the paddling, the canoe moved forward quickly. Xiao Xian's two arms became blurry. When both of his arms began to feel sore and tired, Xiao Xian picked up a stone needle and shot it into the air. When the needle was about 100 meters above the water, it let out a bang sound and instantly turned into fine powder. Seeing this, Cha-Cha was so frightened that he almost threw away the paddle. Xiao Xian also felt his scalp go numb. Under the clear, cloudless sky, something that made one's hair stand on end was happening in such a calm and eerie manner. "It's coming down. Hurry! Row!" Xiao Xian continued to row. This time, Cha-Cha was also anxious. In his panic, he broke the handle of the paddle, and the two paddles fell into the water. Cha-Cha did not bother to go back to pick them up. He grabbed the other two paddles in the canoe, wishing that he could grow two more nimble hands to row the paddles. The canoe moved quickly, like a speedboat with a high horsepower engine, rushing forward. "Hurry! Hurry! Hurry!" The pressure above their heads was getting stronger and stronger. Cha-Cha's feathers were all standing up. During the vigorous paddling, a feather fell from Cha-Cha's body, but was lifted up by Cha-Cha's vigorous paddling. Because there was no wind, the feather did not float high, about 20 meters. However, at this height of 20 meters above the water, the feather, like the stone needle, instantly turned into powder. Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha did not raise their heads to look. They did not have time to care about anything else. The pressure above them was still there, and it was still descending. If Xiao Xian could not escape, he would end up like the stone needle and the fallen feather. Xiao Xian was sweating all over. The sweat on his forehead slid into his eyes, and he felt a stinging pain. He did not bother to wipe it off, but quickly blinked twice. He was still staring forward, and his hands did not slow down at all. He did not calculate the time, and he could not calculate it. Xiao Xian did not know what was descending, and what its speed was. He could only focus all his attention on paddling, and controlling the direction to escape in a straight line. After rowing for an unknown amount of time, Xiao Xian heard a bang from behind. He woke up from his trance. The pressure above their heads was no longer there. Turning his head, he saw water vapor rising from the river behind him. Moreover, the water vapor was still increasing, like a thick fog. The canoe was still moving. Xiao Xian looked at the bird lying on its back, and using all its strength to paddle. He lifted his leg and kicked it. "Okay, we're over." Cha-Cha was still immersed in paddling. When it was kicked by Xiao Xian, it was so frightened that it almost spread its wings and flew up. If Xiao Xian's hands were not fast enough, the two wooden paddles would have been lost again. The calm water surface rippled again, and the wind blew. Xiao Xian adjusted the sails, and with the help of the wind, they continued to move forward. As for Cha-Cha, he would let it rest for a while. It probably could not fly now. Chapter 153. Xiao Xian knew that this river was very big, but he didn't know it was this big. Sail, paddle, cha-cha, pulling the canoe, these three methods alternated. Other than a short break, the canoe continued to move forward. According to the sun and the moon at night, Xiao Xian always judged the direction and tried his best to keep the canoe moving in a straight line. Although they encountered a lot of trouble along the way, and even encountered a group of crazy fish fighting, forcing them to take a long detour, it wasn't to the extent that they couldn't see the end of the river. After today, it will be 15 days, Xiao Xian said to Cha-Cha, who was resting beside him, as he still couldn't see the end of the river in front of them. Cha-Cha, who was resting at the side, responded listlessly. In addition to the excitement and novelty at the beginning, countless frightening things had happened one after another. It was so scared that it had recently lost a lot of feathers. Xiao Xian was also tired. He hadn't had a good rest for 15 days straight. Although his recovery was very strong, he couldn't withstand long-term exhaustion. Moreover, Xiao Xian was most worried that if they continued to move forward, they wouldn't have time to return. After all, according to the original plan, they would return if they couldn't find the other side in 15 days. But now, he felt that they should still move forward. Cha-Cha, do you think there's a mainland in front? Xiao Xian kicked the bird beside him. This river was already beyond his imagination. If they continued to walk forward, he would even believe that they could reach the sea. Cha-Cha, who was grooming its feathers, raised its head and replied, then looked forward. It could feel the aura of a mainland in front of them, but it didn't know how far it was. Xiao Xian actually had the same feeling. He felt that if they continued to walk forward, they would reach the other side of the river. But that was too risky. Even if they reached the other side, what if the river was already falling rapidly and they couldn't see the top? What should they choose? Continue forward or go back? Xiao Xian closed his eyes and felt the totem in his mind. The totem flame in his mind started to roll, and the direction in which the flame was drifting was towards the front, and it was rolling quite violently. Opening his eyes, Xiao Xian adjusted the sail. Keep going. Cha-Cha answered weakly. It began to miss its life in the tribe. However, when it thought about the new land that Xiao Xian had mentioned, it became excited again. After traveling for another 8 days, Xiao Xian felt the totemic flames in his mind surging more violently, but at the same time, the river water was flowing faster. Xiao Xian had seen such a situation before. When this happened, the river level would drop sharply. Back in the tribe, they might still see a few rocks that were originally in the water, but the next day they would see a muddy slope. Cha-Cha flew in the sky, pulling the boat. While Xiao Xian was pondering, Cha-Cha shouted from the sky. Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. Cha-Cha's cry meant that there was something in front of them. It was very likely that it was the river bank. Cha-Cha landed, and Xiao Xian jumped onto its back. Then, he let Cha-Cha take it up into the air to take a look. It was not easy to see on the canoe, but in the air they could see a very thin black line in the distance. If they did not look carefully, they would not have noticed it. Cha-Cha was still holding the rope in its claws, so it could not abandon the canoe and fly up alone. If it did, the canoe would be washed away by the river. Even if they could not fly higher to observe, Xiao Xian was already excited. After drifting on the river for more than 20 days, Xiao Xian had no confidence if he still could not see the end of the river. Even if the totemic flames were rolling fiercely, if they could not reach the shore before the river level dropped sharply, they would still die. Now that he could see the border, the pressure in his heart was greatly reduced. He felt that the exhaustion from the past 20 days had dissipated, and he felt much more relaxed. Okay, Cha-Cha, we're almost there. Put in more effort. Xiao Xian returned to the canoe, and Cha-Cha continued to pull. The river flowed faster and faster, and the number of piranhas in the water gradually decreased. He did not know if it was because of the change in the river, or because of other reasons. At least in the past 2 days, Xiao Xian did not encounter any other threats from the fish in the river. It was only the wind, the direction of the wind, and the speed of the river that slowed down the canoe's progress. The black line at the border became more and more obvious. Looking at the sky, Xiao Xian hoped that they could reach the shore before sunset. There were too many unknown variables at night. As they gradually approached the river bank, Xiao Xian discovered that the river bank looked like a mountain, because the river level had dropped too much. Fortunately, although it felt like they were sailing at the bottom of an abyss, they had finally reached the end of the abyss. This was a new place. Xiao Xian suddenly felt an indescribable excitement in his heart. The river bank was similar to the one in the tribe. Near the shore there was a steep slope. However, not far from there was still water flowing down. That should be a tributary, and the water flowing out of that tributary flowed into the river. But now that the river level had dropped, the water from that tributary flowed down the slope. The closer they got to the shore, the stronger the wind became. The wind carried with it the stench of mud and the smell of decay. Xiao Xian looked at the height of the shore and the steep slope. He thought that the canoe would not be able to reach the shore. After more than 20 days of sailing, although they had used very strong and corrosion-resistant trees, they had been hit and bitten by large fish during the voyage, leaving behind many crisscrossing marks. There was even a hole at the bottom. Xiao Xian used something to plug it. This canoe had already completed its mission. Xiao Xian carried the remaining things on the canoe onto his back. After Cha-Cha landed, he jumped onto Cha-Cha's back. One man and one eagle flew towards the river bank. Without the eagle to pull the damaged canoe, it floated downstream along with the rapid flow of the river. Soon, only a small shadow was left, and then it disappeared from Xiao Xian's sight. The wind became stronger. Without a certain direction, Cha-Cha almost fell into the mud several times. "Let's go, buddy. Put in more effort." Xiao Xian held on tightly to the eagle's body and shouted. Cha-Cha flapped its wings with all its strength and flew upwards. While flying, Xiao Xian suddenly said, "Wait, let's go over there and take a look." Although it didn't understand why Xiao Xian wanted to go over there, Cha-Cha still turned and flew in the direction Xiao Xian pointed. Soon, Xiao Xian saw a figure trapped in the mud and being dragged down by seaweed. "Help me!" That person was still shouting. His voice was a little hoarse. It was obvious that he had been shouting for some time, but no one came over. Moreover, he didn't seem to have much strength left. Every time he shouted, he would gasp for breath. That person didn't sound very old. His body was covered in mud, and nearly 2/3 of his body had been pulled down. There were also seaweeds sticking out of the mud and wrapping around him. Cha-Cha couldn't get close, so Xiao Xian let Cha-Cha hold on to the rope. He tied the other end of the rope and jumped down. "Give me your hand," Xiao Xian said. Seeing Xiao Xian jump down from the eagle's back, the person was stunned. However, he quickly pulled his arms out of the mud with all his strength. Xiao Xian grabbed his arms and pulled them up. The seaweed was too tight. If Xiao Xian pulled them up forcefully, they would probably break the person's arms. Xiao Xian freed one hand and let Cha-Cha go down a little more. He took out his stone knife and quickly cut the seaweed sticking out of the mud. When Xiao Xian pulled the person up, the person who was trapped in the mud gathered the last of his strength and tried to break free from the seaweed still tied to his legs. Xiao Xian noticed that although this person's face was covered in mud and he couldn't see clearly, his irises were yellowish-brown. His pupils were vertical like blades, giving off a fierce, cold and merciless vibe. "I wonder which tribe he's from," Xiao Xian thought. Before Xiao Xian left, he went to the shaman's place for training and read almost all of the shaman's hidden scrolls. Xiao Xian knew too little about the person in front of him, so he couldn't match this person to the one recorded in the scrolls. When the person was finally pulled out of the mud, Cha-Cha began to fly up quickly. When he finally flew up and his feet touched the ground again, He suddenly felt a sense of fulfillment. This was solid ground, not the swaying surface of the river. The feeling of being rooted and solid was indeed more reliable. Cha-Cha also stood on the grassy ground and stepped on it a few times. As for the person who was rescued by Xiao Xian, he looked like an underage child. However, he was very vigilant against Xiao Xian, even though Xiao Xian had just saved his life. The person didn't say anything, so Xiao Xian didn't ask. After calming down, he began to pay attention to his surroundings. There were traces of human activity around. There weren't many, but he could see some. There were also mountains in the distance, and this area was mostly muddy. There were many potholes and pools of water. The natural depressions on the ground formed pools of different sizes. In addition, Xiao Xian also saw traces of claws and teeth on some of the rocks beside the pools. Those weren't made by humans in the water? However, Xiao Xian didn't feel any danger from these pools, and neither did Cha-Cha. Either the creatures in the water were very good at hiding, or there weren't any dangerous creatures in the water at the moment. The person who was rescued by Xiao Xian lay quietly on the ground, panting. Although he didn't say anything, his eyes kept glancing at Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha. Finally, the child couldn't help but ask, "Who are you? Why are you in our tribe?" he asked. "Your tribe? Which tribe are you from?" Xiao Xian asked. Seeing that the other party was still very vigilant, he said, "My eagle and I came from a faraway place by boat. However, the river level dropped too quickly, so we quickly went ashore. The boat was washed away just now, and I don't know how far it has gone." "How long have you been in the river?" The other party didn't believe Xiao Xian's words, and looked at Xiao Xian suspiciously. He seemed very puzzled that Xiao Xian didn't know his tribe. "More than 20 days, Xiao Xian said. The other party's eyes widened, and the pupils in his tawny eyes were still narrowed. Chapter 154. In the animal skin scroll that the shaman showed Xiao Xian, there was no record of a tribe living here. What the scroll said was that this place used to be a wasteland. Back then, the ancestors of the tribe left their homeland for a new place. Unexpectedly, the earth cracked open, and the crack grew bigger and bigger until the end could not be seen. According to Xiao Xian's guess, after the huge crack appeared, because of the changes in the topography of other places, many tributaries flowed in and gradually filled the crack, turning it into a river. Because of this series of changes, creatures from the sea entered, such as those huge river beasts. However, this huge river formed because of the changes in the sky also blocked the ancestors' way back. The ancestors were always in awe of the things formed by the changes in the sky. Therefore, more often than not, even if they wanted to return, they would choose to find another way instead of returning directly from the river. In addition, the river was full of all kinds of threats, so their thoughts were even more diluted. Nearly 1,000 years had passed, and the Yanjiao tribe lived alone on the other side of the river. On this side of the river, there had also been a huge change. The once wasteland had become a wet area with many ponds and rivers, and there was even a tribe here. Fortunately, the language was interconnected, so communication was not that complicated. "What is the name of your tribe?" Xiao Xian asked. The other party did not answer. He stood up and carefully looked at Xiao Xian, and continued to ask, "You really stayed on the river for more than 20 days? "Yes," Xiao Xian answered. "You liar!" After the other party shouted, he strode towards Xiao Xian, and with a fierce fist, he punched towards Xiao Xian's abdomen. Bang! Their palms met. The next moment, the opponent found that his fist was tightly clenched. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free. His eyes flashed with killing intent, and his other hand reached out like lightning. His two hands joined together, and like a clamp, he tightly clamped Xiao Xian's fist. At the same time, his ankle suddenly turned, and his body was in the air, spinning rapidly. The mud on his body splashed in all directions as he spun. Bang! His feet landed on the ground and the spinning stopped. Who told you to lie to me, huh? The expression on the person's face froze. His eyes widened as he stared at his hands in disbelief. He originally thought that he would break the other party's arm, but instead, he found that not only was his arm not broken, but both of his hands were tightly bound with straw ropes. He raised his head and looked at the person standing in front of him. Then, he looked at his own hand. How could this be? Xiao Xian looked at the person in front of him with a headache. He thought that the children of the Yanjiao tribe were fierce enough, but he didn't expect the one in front of him to be even more troublesome. If he said something wrong, he would use a killing move. If he hadn't pulled back quickly, his entire arm would have been twisted off. This brat was lying on the ground motionlessly just now because he was recovering his strength. It wasn't easy for him to recover a little, but he used it to deal with his savior. What should I say about him? The attack just now had used up almost all of the strength he had recovered. The person whose hands were tied was panting heavily as he glared fiercely at Xiao Xian. The layer of mud on his face and other parts of his body had been shaken off by the spinning just now. Although there were still traces of mud, Xiao Xian could already see that he was different. Xiao Xian noticed that when the other party attacked him just now, totem tattoos had appeared on his body as well. However, the totem tattoos were all over his body, connected together in small blocks. On his face, his mouth was split open, almost reaching the back of his ears. Looking at the mouth full of sharp teeth, Xiao Xian was willing to bet that the brat in front of him was planning to bite him directly later. Now that he had no strength, the tattoos on his body gradually disappeared, and his mouth returned to its original shape. I never knew that someone would try to kill their savior. I'm sure the people of your tribe aren't good people either. Xiao Xian said. You're the bad one, thief. The other party was still stubborn. What did I steal? Which eye of yours saw it? How dare you accuse me of being a thief without seeing anything? This is called framing. Do you know what framing means? You only know how to talk nonsense. Is your brain filled with sh*t? Have you heard of the story of the farmer and the snake? Oh, you definitely haven't heard of it. It's about a snake that was saved by someone, but in the end it bit the person who saved it. The next time you're in danger, let's see who will save you. Do you still remember the feeling of waiting for death? Xiao Xian blabbered on and on. He noticed that there were other people around, and most of them were with this brat. They had just arrived and were observing the situation. Xiao Xian had to tell them the truth and his grievances. If the other party still tried to kill him, then they could only fight or fly away with Cha-Cha. The person was stunned by Xiao Xian's words. Although he didn't understand a lot of the words Xiao Xian said, it didn't stop him from understanding the general meaning. Did he really do something wrong? After speaking, Xiao Xian snorted heavily, angry and disappointed. He walked to Cha-Cha's side and said, In the future, we'll stay away from your tribe and don't interact with ungrateful people like you. Do you know what it means to be ungrateful? Forget it, it's useless to talk to you. Cha-Cha, let's go. Wait. The person waiting in the forest quickly walked out and stopped Xiao Xian, who was about to jump onto the bird's back. The person who walked out was an adult and a child. The adult was a very sturdy man. Like the brat next to him, his eyes were yellowish-brown. However, the little girl standing next to him had blackish-brown eyes. She didn't look as fierce and gave people a feeling of gentleness. Seeing the person who walked out, the person whose hands were tied up said happily, "Father." However, before he could rejoice for long, the person strode over and grabbed the animal skin shirt in front of his chest. He was lifted up and slapped a few times. The slaps were quite heavy. Xiao Xian. This kind of fierceness in educating children was too similar to the Yanjiao tribe. Everything had to be done after a beating. It was just that he didn't know if all tribes had this kind of barbaric style. She was already out of strength and had been beaten up by her father. She sniffled and did not dare to cry. She only looked rather aggrieved. The sturdy man who walked over didn't care about him and threw the person who was beaten up to the side. Shui Lan, look after him. Okay. The girl who was following behind quickly replied. After beating up his child, the sturdy man looked at Xiao Xian and restrained the fierceness in his eyes. He tried his best to show a kind smile. However, no matter how he smiled, his eyes still gave people a cold feeling. I'm really sorry. Little brother, were you the one who saved Qin Jia? Oh, he is Qin Jia, my child. My name is Fu Shi, the sturdy man said to Xiao Xian. That's right, I saved him. Xiao Xian sighed. It was my first time leaving the tribe, so I wanted to wander around and see the world. In the end, the first person I met was actually Sai. Xiao Xian told the story of how he met Qin Jia, how he saved Qin Jia, and how Qin Jia, this little rascal, treated him. He didn't lie at all. Xiao Xian only came over when Qin Jia's hands were tied up, so he didn't know what happened before. Therefore, Xiao Xian explained everything in detail. Moreover, he fully played the role of a friendly and kind ignorant person who went out to wander around. After listening to Xiao Xian's story, Fu Shi clenched his fists so tightly that they made cracking sounds. He glared at Qin Jia fiercely. His eyes seemed to say, "See if I don't teach you a lesson when we get back." Qin Jia couldn't help but shrink back. When Fu Shi turned back to look at Xiao Xian, his face revealed a smile and he hurriedly apologized. He didn't forget to explain for his child. He's not usually like this. It's just that recently, some things were lost in the tribe and we couldn't catch the thief, so he became this crazy? Xiao Xian glanced at Qin Jia. If it wasn't for his quick hands and ability to deal with it, if it was someone else, how could saving Qin Jia's life only to have their arms twisted and broken? Obviously, Fu Shi also knew that his son was in the wrong. The tribe's reputation was already bad, and the shaman had always told everyone to be friendly to outsiders. But in the end, not long after, his own child gave his savior a killing blow. Simply asking for a beating, knowing that Xiao Xian didn't know anything about the outside world, he said, "This is the drumming tribe. We are all from the drumming tribe." Drumming tribe? Xiao Xian really hadn't heard of it. "I come from the Yanjiao tribe." Xiao Xian looked at the other party and said while observing Fu Shi's expression. Fu Shi frowned and thought carefully, but he really couldn't remember. He simply couldn't find anything related to the Yanjiao tribe in his memories. "Your tribe should be very far away, right?" Fu Shi asked. "Very far. I took a boat and stayed on the river for more than 20 days before arriving here," Xiao Xian said. Qin Jia, who was beaten up and thrown to the side, was about to say something when Shui Lan lightly kicked him. Only then did he swallow the words he was about to say. Fu Shi also seemed to be thinking about the possibility of what he said. Xiao Xian knew that their biggest suspicion was that he stayed on the river for more than 20 days. It seemed that he would have to explain more about this later. Although he was also suspicious, Fu Shi still warmly invited Xiao Xian to go back to the tribe with them. He said that he wanted to receive him properly, thank him for saving his child, and also apologize on behalf of his child. Looking at the sky, Xiao Xian agreed. He knew that the other party wanted to confirm his identity again, but Xiao Xian also thought about how to deal with them. Compared to leaving now, it was better to go back to the drumming tribe with them. He could also learn more about the situation here from them. Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha followed behind them and walked towards the central area of the drumming tribe. On the way, they met other drumming tribesmen. Their clothing and weapons were actually not much different from the Yanjiao tribe. At most, they were just a little more meticulous. Xiao Xian also discovered that there were 2 types of drumming tribesmen on the way. One type was like Qin Jia and Fu Shi, with yellow-brown eyes that looked very fierce. The other type was like the girl Shueilon, with black-brown eyes that were gentler. Compared to the former, they gave off a more harmless feeling. After walking through a forest, many buildings appeared in front of Xiao Xian's eyes. Because the ground was very wet, there were many places with pools. Therefore, most of the buildings here were piled up, while the upper floors were built with dry railings. In front of many houses, on the lower steps of the stairs, there were some arm-length crocodiles lying on top of them resting. Chapter 155. This was a place with many crocodiles, and the marks Xiao Xian saw on the rocks by the pond should have been made by crocodiles. However, those frightening crocodiles lived together with the people of the tribe. They seemed to be very harmonious. What was more interesting was that Xiao Xian noticed the coldness in the eyes of the tribesmen when they looked at people. It was as if there was no emotion, only ferocious. Their vertical pupils were very similar to crocodiles. Were these people or crocodiles? Xiao Xian had never seen anyone other than the Yanjiao tribe. After coming to this world, he had only been moving around on the other side of the river, so he didn't know much about this world. Even though he had read the animal skin scrolls left behind by his ancestors, many of the records were not detailed, and he even had to rely on guessing. As for what the real world was like outside the tribe, Xiao Xian had to see it for himself. Cha-Cha didn't fly into the sky because Fu Shi said that the tribesmen were very vigilant against birds in the sky. So, before getting permission from the tribe, they shouldn't fly into the sky. Otherwise, once they landed at a low altitude, they would be mercilessly attacked by the tribesmen. For this reason, Cha-Cha could only follow behind, step by step. Some of the small crocodiles resting on the steps or by the pond quickly climbed back into the water when Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha came over. They swung their tails hard and quickly sank into the pond. Seeing Xiao Xian staring at the small crocodiles, Fu Shi said, "The treasure fish are very vigilant against outsiders. Fortunately, the big ones have already left, so there are only these small ones. Otherwise, you would be in more danger. Outsiders shouldn't wander around. If you want to go out, you must be accompanied by tribesmen. Otherwise, you will be easily attacked." Fu Shi told Xiao Xian about the things to pay attention to in the drumming tribe, including the temperament of the crocodiles. Listening to Fu Shi's explanation, Xiao Xian was relieved. Fortunately, these people weren't crocodiles. They were just living in harmony with crocodiles. They even called crocodiles treasure fish, which showed how important these crocodiles were to the tribesmen. Xiao Xian also warned Cha-Cha not to eat these little crocodiles as food. Otherwise, the people of the drumming tribe would come over and punish them. It might even lead to a fierce battle. Just like the people in the tribe, there were two types of crocodiles. One had yellowish-brown eyes, dark brown scales on its back, and a light yellow belly. The smaller crocodiles were slightly lighter in color, with some black spots or net-like patterns. Even the baby crocodiles had carapaces that extended from their backs to their tails. Some of them even had horns on their heads. Xiao Xian had never seen anything like that in his previous life. This kind of yellow-brown-eyed crocodile was very strong in its adult form. It had a violent temperament and was very aggressive. If an outsider walked around the tribe and encountered this kind of crocodile, they would be attacked by it. As for the other type of crocodile with dark brown eyes, its carapace was not so obvious, and it looked a little longer. Their tempers were gentler, and their eyes were less fierce. They looked just like the people in the tribe with dark brown eyes, and they looked more harmless. It seemed that this was the kind of tribe that worshipped animals. Xiao Xian remembered Fu Shi's words in his heart. Although the parents of these little crocodiles were not here, they would be back soon. In this unfamiliar place, he had to be careful. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to return alive. Looking at these crocodiles, Xiao Xian thought of the move that Chen Jia had used on him. Wasn't it similar to the crocodile's death roll? After entering the core area of the tribe, Fu Shi did not directly bring Xiao Xian to his home. Instead, he first went to the chief's place. Presumably, someone had already passed the news on the way. Outside the chief's house, there were a few people curiously looking at Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha. However, those pairs of eyes still looked cold, making Cha-Cha uncomfortably shake its wings. Several times it wanted to fly, but fortunately, Xiao Xian calmed it down. The chief of the drumming tribe, Fan Mu, was a strong middle-aged man. His eyes were also yellow-brown. When he looked at Xiao Xian, it was like a fierce beast in the forest staring at him. There was a sense of majesty and oppression. "Welcome to the drumming tribe." Fan Mu looked at Xiao Xian and said. There was no smile on Fan Mu's face. Of course, not smiling was also good. At least it was better than Fu Shi's emotionless smile. Yanjiao tribe, Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian introduced himself. This was what Xiao Xian had asked the shaman before he left. After leaving the tribe, he would show up as Xiao Xian. Its name is Cha-Cha, but my friend doesn't like to stand on the ground all the time. I hope you can allow it to fly for a while. Xiao Xian said. Okay. Fan Mu signaled to the people beside him, telling them not to attack Cha-Cha, but at the same time to keep an eye on it. After Cha-Cha flew into the sky, Xiao Xian stepped on the stairs and followed Fan Mu into the house. In the house, there was a man with dark brown eyes, who looked older than Fan Mu. This is the shaman of our tribe. Fan Mu introduced. Hello, I am Xiao Xian from the Yanjiao tribe. Welcome to the drumming tribe. The shaman of the drumming tribe said. There was a trace of a smile on his face, which made him feel more amiable. The same words, when spoken by the shaman in front of him, made him feel more comfortable than when spoken by Fan Mu. Moreover, when the shaman smiled, he didn't have that stiff and intimidating feeling. The shaman was very similar to the old faker. He looked approachable and easy to talk to, but in fact, he was more cunning than anyone else. No matter what Xiao Xian thought in his heart, he still showed a reserved smile on his face, fully playing the role of a newcomer who left the tribe for the first time. Fu Shi, who led Xiao Xian here, was also called in by Fan Mu, and told him what happened when he met Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian added some things that Fu Shi couldn't explain clearly. Hearing that Xiao Xian had stayed on the river for more than 20 days, Fan Mu and the shaman's expressions changed. How did you stay on the river for more than 20 days? The shaman asked. Boat, oars, and Cha-Cha. Xiao Xian told them some things he saw on the river, and some strange and dangerous phenomena, but he didn't mention the sail. Having a boat and an eagle pulling the boat was enough. With Xiao Xian's narration, Fan Mu and the shaman's expressions gradually eased. Obviously, they knew something about the river, and knew that Xiao Xian wasn't lying. Moreover, in their opinion, Xiao Xian was really lucky to come out of such a dangerous situation safely. However, the Cha-Cha also contributed a lot. If they also had such a bird that could pull the boat, they should be able to go further, right? I remember that wooden boats will sink when they are far away from the river bank. Why didn't yours? Fan Mu stared at Xiao Xian and asked. Won't the wood sink when you reach the river bank? In our tribe, even on the shore, once the wood enters the water, it will soon be dragged to the bottom of the river. Our tribe has a treasure fish, Fu Shi said proudly. Because there were many crocodiles near the river bank, there were few other creatures, so the wood thrown into the water wouldn't be dragged down by the insects that gnawed on the wood. Then how did you do it? Fan Mu asked. Because it was the rainy season in our tribe. After the rainy season, there were no insects in the river, so the boat could go into the river. When the water level rose again, the insects would come back. How could that be? Xiao Xian's words surprised several people in the room. Our tribe's shaman asked me to take this with me. Xiao Xian took out the stone with the tribe's two-horned totem pattern, and handed it to the shaman of the drumming tribe in front of him. The totem pattern drawn by the shaman was special. As a shaman, He could feel the totem power used when drawing it, as well as the emotions the shaman wanted to express. It was indeed friendly and warm. Cha-Cha also has it. Xiao Xian walked to the door and whistled. The walkway outside the chief's house was much wider than others, and the planks were very strong. Cha-Cha landed on the walkway outside the house. The shaman of the drumming tribe carefully looked at the totem pattern on Cha-Cha's feet, and confirmed what Xiao Xian said just now. This bird was also blessed by the Yanjiao tribe's shaman. People or things that could be blessed by the tribe's shaman were all valued by the tribe. It was also hard to fake. Moving his hand away from Cha-Cha's claws, the shaman nodded to the chief Fan Mu. The chief's cold eyes softened a little. After talking for a while, the shaman and the chief's suspicions about Xiao Xian had been greatly reduced. They had never heard of the Yanjiao tribe, but after talking, the shaman of the drumming tribe took the initiative to express his sincere enthusiasm. Hearing that it was Xiao Xian's first time out of the tribe, the shaman suggested that Xiao Xian stay for a while. After the Water Moon Festival, there will be people from the tribe going to other tribes to trade. You can go with them, the shaman said. The people next to him wanted to say something, but the shaman raised his hand to stop them. Then it settled. Fu Shi, Xiao Xian will stay with you for the time being, the chief said. The chief's words settled this matter. The others didn't say anything more, but they still looked at Xiao Xian with vigilance. Okay, Fu Shi replied. After leaving the chief's house, Fu Shi took Xiao Xian home. Generally, outsiders were taken care of by whoever brought them in. Besides, Xiao Xian had saved Chen Jia's life, so Fu Shi and the others had to take good care of him. The sky gradually darkened, and the surroundings were damp with water vapor. The 2 moons in the sky kept the ground from being too dark. As the moons became rounder, even in the middle of the night, the surrounding scenery could be seen. Fu Shi's house was also built in the style of a fence, built next to a pool. When Xiao Xian arrived, a woman was waiting there. That was Fu Shi's wife, Ping. Next to Ping was Chen Jia, who was standing there obediently. His face was swollen, obviously he had been beaten up again. Ping also showed her enthusiasm, but when she smiled, it made people feel uncomfortable. Her eyes were the same as Fu Shi's and Chen Jia's, yellowish-brown. Xiao Xian, right? Thank you for saving my family's Chen Jia. After speaking, Ping carried down a large pile of things from a table outside the house. Everyone in the house hadn't eaten dinner yet. They had been waiting for Fu Shi and Xiao Xian. Since the 2 of them had returned, Ping also prepared a feast. Xiao Xian only saw a shadow flash in front of him, and a whole deer leg was placed in front of him. The deer leg had been roasted, but it wasn't cooked. When the meat was torn open, blood flowed out. He raised his head to look at the other 3. This family of 3, their mouths had doubled in size. They were holding the food and tearing it apart. When they bit, blood spilled out, splattering all over the table. Xiao Xian. Chapter 156. Xiao Xian only ate a little of the deer leg and gave the rest to Cha-Cha. Cha-Cha liked to eat raw meat. The deer should be of the same breed as the giant horned deer. Their meat tasted similar. After seeing the way the 3 of them ate, Xiao Xian had a new understanding of the people of this tribe. At night, Cha-Cha found a big tree outside and slept while standing on it. Xiao Xian slept in Chen Jia's room, while Chen Jia slept with his parents. The people of the drumming tribe did not put animal skins in their houses during this season. They slept directly on wooden planks, and through the gaps between the planks, they could see the water below. There were small crocodiles swimming below, and the subtle movements in the pond could be clearly heard. The windows were open and the moonlight shone in. The wind carried the smell of water vapor and mud. This was the first night Xiao Xian spent after leaving the tribe, and it was a very novel feeling. Just as he was thinking about today's events, and about the drumming tribe, which was not recorded in the ancestral scroll, Fu Shi came in. Fu Shi was holding a glowing object in his hand. It was like a small lamp, illuminating the small room. This is. Xiao Xian was very curious about the object in Fu Shi's hand. It was a fist-sized glowing crystal. Xiao Xian had never seen it before in the Yanjiao tribe. This is a water moon stone, produced by our tribe. Fu Shi handed the stone in his hand to Xiao Xian. Water moon stone was seen in the scroll, but it was not recorded in detail, only a name. It was cold to the touch. Xiao Xian felt the energy within the stone. It was similar to the energy of a fire seed. The totemic flame in his mind did not react, but the egg wrapped around the totemic flame flashed. A shape gradually formed inside the totemic flame. It was a brown crocodile, surrounded by a circle of white flames, giving people a cold feeling. This was the totem of the drumming tribe. There was no energy in the crystal that could be absorbed. When the crocodile totem in his mind disappeared, Xiao Xian looked at the crystal again and handed it back to Fu Shi. It's very bright and beautiful. Fu Shi was stunned. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. Many people would reveal a look of fondness or greed after seeing the water moon stones. When a guest came to the tribe, the person in charge of receiving them would take out their own water moonstones. Not every tribe liked the night, so in order to be a good host, they would take out the biggest water moonstones they had in their collection. At the same time, this was also a good way to test people, which was something that the shaman had always advocated. But now, Xiao Xian's reaction was neither light nor heavy. Could it be that he didn't know the value of water moonstones? You don't like water moonstones? Our tribe's water moonstones are sold well. It's only this big. You can exchange it for a lot of things. Fu Shi exaggeratedly opened his arms and gestured. As someone who had seen electric lights, Xiao Xian did not have much interest in these glowing stones. What made him interested was that the shaman of the drumming tribe had mentioned the trade between tribes. Now that Fu Shi brought it up again, Xiao Xian seized the opportunity to ask. Trade, of course. We will take our water moonstones to other tribes and exchange them for other things. A small piece of water moonstone can be exchanged for a lot of things. Fu Shi told Xiao Xian about his tribe's most famous water moonstone. This kind of stone was indeed very popular with other tribes. It only needed a small piece to emit light. There was no need to light a fire. In the dark, one only needed one of these stones to see the surroundings. It was not afraid of being blown by the wind or flooded. Many people liked it, especially those who were afraid of high-temperature flames. This also reflected the value of the water moonstone. It was like a piece of gold. With it, the people of the drumming tribe could exchange for things they needed, such as good stones, precious herbs, pots, and so on. Every time they traded, they would bring some water moonstones out and exchange for a lot of things. Xiao Xian listened with great interest and asked a few questions from time to time. When it came to his tribe's specialties, Fu Shi was also in high spirits. He explained the production of water moonstones and how to trade them. This was not because Fu Shi was not vigilant, but because many tribes knew about the water moonstones. It was not an absolute secret. They talked until late at night. Xiao Xian let Fu Shi go back. As for the water moonstone, Xiao Xian also let him take it away. With such a bright stone, how could he sleep? If there was an accident, it would be hard to hide. The night was full of danger, but it was also a kind of cover. Other people's houses were dark, but this room was bright. Wasn't this an obvious target? Fu Shi did not know what Xiao Xian was thinking. He only thought that Xiao Xian was a good person. After returning to his room, he praised Xiao Xian to his wife. In return, the couple lectured Chen Jia again. The next day, Xiao Xian ate a bloody breakfast and went out. The sun was already out. The small crocodiles in the pool climbed out to bask in the sun. In the pool in front of Chen Jia's house, there were 3 small crocodiles. 2 had yellow-brown eyes and 1 had black-brown eyes. When Cha-Cha landed next to them, she even tried to scare them. The 3 small crocodiles were so scared that they ran back into the pool. Before they entered the pool, Xiao Xian heard their cries. Only the 2 yellow brown-eyed crocodiles were crying. The other black brown-eyed crocodile did not make a sound. In other words, its cries were different from other crocodiles. Normal people would not be able to hear it. Xiao Xian thought that all black brown-eyed crocodiles were like that. However, he found that the black brown-eyed crocodile in the pool next door made the same cries as other crocodiles. The crocodile in front of the pool was an exception. Because of this, Xiao Xian asked Chen Jia, who was kicking water at the side. Chen Jia was still a little awkward. His father said that Xiao Xian really did not know anything. He also did not have much interest in the water moonstone. Moreover, the other party had saved him before. When he thought of his own actions, he felt embarrassed. "It can't cry," Chen Jia said. "It can't cry." "Yes, it couldn't cry when it was born. My mother said that it was mute and very pitiful. So every time she gave it a lot of meat to eat, the best meat." When he was in the tribe, Xiao Xian could hear the cries of Night Swallow. Other than high-level totemic warriors, no one else could hear it. Now, Xiao Xian could also hear its cries, but Chen Jia could not. Fu Shi and Ping were both intermediate-level totemic warriors. It could be seen from their eyes. Compared to Chen Jia's eyes, their eyes were more yellow. This was a characteristic of the drumming tribe. Beginner and intermediate-level totemic warriors could not hear it, but it was unknown if higher-level totemic warriors could hear it. After Cha-Cha left the pool, the black brown-eyed crocodile climbed out of the pool and continued to bask in the sun. At this time, someone ran over. "Chen Jia, where's your father?" the person asked. "In the house." "Fu Shi, come out quickly," the person shouted. "What's wrong?" Fu Shi walked out and asked. "Go over, the chief has something to say." Seeing the other party's dignified expression, Fu Shi knew that the matter was quite serious. He did not hesitate and hurriedly left. Before leaving, he warned Chen Jia, "Don't run around. If you run again, I'll beat you to death." Chen Jia's mouth twitched, and he reluctantly replied with an N. Ping was not at home, so there was only Xiao Xian and Chen Jia here. Xiao Xian looked at the surrounding families. People were all called out, so something big must have happened. "What happened in your tribe?" Xiao Xian asked. "I don't know, it's probably about the water moonstones," Chen Jia said. Thinking about what Fu Shi said last night, Xiao Xian said, "You mean, there might have been thieves who stole the water moonstones?" "Yes, every year at this time, there would be people from the tribe who would come and steal the water moonstones when they come out." Mentioning the water moonstones, Chen Jia gnashed his teeth. The stolen water moonstones could be exchanged for a lot of things. "Who came to steal the water moonstones?" Xiao Xian asked. "Many other tribes and maybe even thieves. Every time thieves appear, a lot of water moonstones are stolen. They deserve to die the most." In the afternoon, Fu Shi hurried back with some stone tools and warned Xiao Xian and Chen Jia not to run around. Someone in the tribe discovered the drumming tribe. "The tribe's defense has been strengthened. Tonight, I'll be in charge of guarding, so I won't be coming back. Don't go out." Finishing his words, Fu Shi hurriedly left. The people in the surrounding houses were like Fu Shi, taking their tools and hurrying out. Every one of them had a dignified expression, their eyes filled with killing intent. Waiting for Fu Shi to leave, Xiao Xian asked Chen Jia, "What are the drumming tribe people like?" Chen Jia showed a rare expression of fear and resentment. "The drumming tribe people are crazy. In order to achieve their goals, they will do anything. They are not afraid of death. They are very fast." Listening to Chen Jia's somewhat messy explanation, Xiao Xian speculated that the drumming tribe people were similar to death warriors. In their eyes, there was only the goal, nothing else was important. They were really a group of lunatics. This group of lunatics was not close to the drumming tribe, so they did not appear often. However, every time they appeared, they would set off a rain of terror. And this time, the drumming tribe's goal was most likely to be the water moonstones. Because the drumming tribe had been discovered, everyone was very nervous. Even during dinner, their appetite had decreased. Ping and Chen Jia did not eat much. After eating, Ping went to deliver food to Fu Shi, telling Chen Jia to stay at home obediently. However, Chen Jia was not a person who would wait at home. When other companions came to look for him, he would leave with them to discuss their own plans. Thus, the only one left in the house was Xiao Xian. The sky had not completely darkened yet. Xiao Xian sat on a wooden plank beside the house. Sitting on it, his legs hung down, allowing him to directly reach into the water. The water rippled, and a figure swam towards Xiao Xian. It was the small crocodile with dark brown eyes. After it swam over, it looked at Xiao Xian. It seemed to be very curious about Xiao Xian, and did not show any signs of fear. After thinking for a while, Xiao Xian reached out his hand and picked up the small crocodile. It had webbed toes, and compared to the other two, it was slimmer. Just now, when he saw it crawl and swim, it was very agile. Other than its cries that could not be heard, it was completely healthy. After being caught, the small crocodile did not run away. It obediently stayed in Xiao Xian's hand. Its temper was indeed much gentler than the one with dark brown eyes. Xiao Xian thought. After observing it for a while, Xiao Xian put it back into the water. Chapter 157. That night, Ping and Chen Jia did not return. Fu Shi needed to continue guarding, and would not return for the whole night. After Cha-Cha threw down a deer he caught from God knows where, he found a tree to eat and rest. Xiao Xian was the only one in the house. Xiao Xian could not walk around. Now that the drumming tribe was in a tense period, as an outsider, Xiao Xian could not run around and attract suspicion. As a newcomer, it was better to make a good impression. If there was a day when the Yanjiao tribesmen could smoothly cross over from the other side of the river, they would inevitably greet the drumming tribesmen. Xiao Xian crossed his legs and rested on the wooden planks in the room. As Xiao Xian swayed his legs, the wooden planks below him creaked slightly. As he was thinking, Xiao Xian heard a few humming sounds coming from outside. It sounded like someone was pinching their nose. These sounds were not made by humans, but by the small crocodiles. Listening to the sounds, it came from the pond where Chen Jia's family lived. It was just that it was not near the house. After a few short cries, the cries came to an abrupt end, but very quickly more cries came out. Only, the cries after that were different from the ones before. The one who made the last sound was the brown-eyed small crocodile that was thought to be mute. The surrounding small crocodiles did not often cry out. They only cried out when they felt threatened or when they felt danger. For example, the 3 small crocodiles that Cha-Cha had teased that day had all cried out. The tribesmen said that these small crocodiles were very sensitive to likes and dislikes. Even if you smiled and looked very kind, if you had bad intentions, these small crocodiles would still avoid you or directly bite you. At this time, what exactly did the 3 small crocodiles in the pond encounter that caused them to cry out like that? The sounds outside continued. Xiao Xian got up and looked outside. He did not see anything out of the ordinary, but somewhere in the pond the cries continued. The other tribesmen should not be able to hear its cries. If other small crocodiles continued to cry out like this, someone would have already come to check on the situation. After thinking for a while, Xiao Xian walked out of the house and headed towards the source of the cries. On the side of the pond, not far from Chen Jia's house, 2 small crocodiles lay motionless in the grass. There was the smell of blood. Xiao Xian squatted down and used his hands to push the 2 small crocodiles over. Their light-colored abdomens show obvious traces of blood, as if they had been split in half. They were killed with a single blow from a sharp weapon. The roar just now, it should be these 2 small crocodiles. After a few cries, it suddenly stopped. It was at that time that they encountered the killer. The two little crocodiles died in the same way. They were killed in a single blow. They were extremely fast and almost didn't make a sound. He was flipping one of the crocodiles open when he heard hurried footsteps, followed by an angry roar. "What did you do to them?" It was a 15 or 16-year-old girl with tawny eyes. Thinking of this kind of person's impatience and temper, Xiao Xian was about to explain, but when she saw the crocodiles lying on the ground, she exploded. "You're looking for death." She seemed to have gone crazy, not giving Xiao Xian a chance to explain. Even if Xiao Xian spoke, she would not listen. The totem patterns on her body appeared, and she exerted strength in her legs, increasing her speed in an instant. Her whole body flew through the air towards Xiao Xian. As she pounced, her entire hand doubled in size, turning into a claw. Combined with the totem patterns on her hand, it looked as if it was covered with a layer of scales. Her fingertips also emitted a crisp sound. Like a ruthless beast, she mercilessly clawed at Xiao Xian. If he did not dodge, this slender hand would latch onto Xiao Xian's arm. Then, like a crocodile biting onto its prey, she would twist and tear his arm off. In the face of such a vicious attack, Xiao Xian reached out and grabbed her wrist before she could grab his arm. However, he did not stop. Instead, he took the opportunity to pull her to the side of the pool. Splash! She was flung into the pond. The surrounding people had already heard the commotion and came out. Under such a tense situation, with roars and the sound of someone falling into the water, it would be strange if they did not notice. The surrounding families, regardless of gender, ran out with tools and surrounded Xiao Xian. The children were not allowed to come out. They only stuck their heads out of their windows or doors to look over. On the grass beside the pond, the two dead crocodiles were very conspicuous. The people of the drumming tribe had always paid attention to crocodiles, so the two crocodiles next to them attracted their attention even more. Originally, they thought it was just a quarrel between two parties, but after seeing the two dead crocodiles, the people who surrounded them became angry. For Xiao Xian, an outsider, the surrounding families had always been on guard against him. They did not allow their children to come in contact with Xiao Xian. There were several times when their children were curious about the eagle and wanted to go over to take a look, but the adults made up stories to scare them. Now, with this scene in front of them, it was needless to say. "I didn't kill them," Xiao Xian said. "If it wasn't you, who else could it be? It must be him. Ban Ling saw it just now." The surrounding people shouted. They looked at Xiao Xian fiercely. Just as they were about to attack, they heard a shout from behind, "Stop!" Hearing this voice, the person who was about to attack immediately halted his movements and turned to look behind him. There were two people who came over. Xiao Xian recognized one of them. It was Chun, the wife of Fan Mu. She was also the one who had shouted for them to stop. As for the young man standing next to her, Xiao Xian did not recognize him. However, the young man had dark brown eyes and gave people the impression that he was calmer. At first glance, he seemed more harmless than the others, but Xiao Xian's intuition told him that this person was more difficult to deal with. "What happened?" Chun walked over and asked. "He killed two small treasured fish. Yes, he even attacked Ban Ling. I already said that outsiders don't have good intentions. We should have kicked him out long ago." The surrounding people began to talk at once, telling him everything that had happened. After listening, Chun did not immediately ask Xiao Xian. Instead, she walked over and picked up the two dead crocodiles. Xiao Xian could feel that Chun's hands were trembling as she held the two crocodiles. She was trying her best to control her emotions. She also had dark brown eyes, but she wasn't as reckless as the others. After looking at the wounds on the crocodiles, Chun asked Xiao Xian, "What do you say?" "I didn't kill them. I just came over and saw that there was something wrong with them. I turned them over and found that they were already dead." When I picked them up to take a look, she came over. Xiao Xian pointed at the person walking out of the pool. Ban Ling, did you really see him kill the small treasured fish? Chun stared at the person walking out of the pool and asked in a deep voice. Ban Ling had just been thrown into the water and was still in a sorry state. When asked, she didn't have time to tidy up her hair and said, I saw him holding the small treasured fish in his hand. In other words, you didn't see Xiao Xian kill the small treasured fish? Chun's tone was not very good, and the surrounding people could hear it. Moreover, after Chun took the 2 crocodiles, many people saw the wounds on the crocodiles. They knew that they were killed by a sharp weapon. Xiao Xian didn't have such a weapon on him. Perhaps they really had wrongly accused him. Thinking of their actions just now, the people surrounding Xiao Xian all retreated in embarrassment. The people who had shouted especially loudly now wished they could bury their heads in their pants to reduce their presence. But there were also some people who were unconvinced. They felt that judging Xiao Xian wasn't the murderer based on a single wound was too arbitrary. Perhaps Xiao Xian was still hiding some secrets? Thinking of this, they took a step forward and were about to say something when they saw Xiao Xian turn around and walk towards the pool. The surrounding people of the drumming tribe were very curious about Xiao Xian's reaction. What was he doing? Xiao Xian walked to the side of the pool, but he didn't enter it. Instead, he stretched out his hand to the side. Soon, the water rippled and a small figure came out of it. Turned out that there was a small hole there, and it was hiding in it. After swimming out, the small crocodile directly climbed onto Xiao Xian's hand. It was actually crying out, but no one could hear it, including the tribe's senior totemic warrior, Chun. Seeing the small crocodile in Xiao Xian's hand, the person who had stepped forward and wanted to argue retracted his leg. If Xiao Xian was the murderer, this small crocodile wouldn't have acted like this. The people of the drumming tribe didn't believe in Xiao Xian, but they believed in their tribe's treasured fish. Ban Ling. Chun glared. Thinking about what Ban Ling had done, Chun couldn't help but feel angry. The tribe's reputation was already bad enough, but this group of people kept on offending people. Yesterday, Chen Jia had attacked his savior, and now, Ban Ling was attacking people without even knowing the truth. The shamaness and chief were doing their best to salvage the drumming tribe's bad reputation. Outsiders who knew about the drumming tribe were already on guard against them, and it was difficult to form good relations with them. Now that there was an outsider who had never heard of the drumming tribe, the shamaness and chief wanted to keep him here and let Xiao Xian see the good side of the drumming tribe. They also wanted him to know that the people of the drumming tribe weren't as bad as outsiders thought. The result? She was really angry. Fortunately, Xiao Xian's strength wasn't bad, otherwise Ban Ling, who had been baring her fangs and brandishing her claws at Xiao Xian, was completely listless. Chun's roar made her shoulders tremble, and she took small steps forward, completely losing her previous momentum. Sorry. Ban Ling apologized to Xiao Xian, her voice sounding as if she was about to cry. Xiao Xian, right? I'm sorry, but just treat what I said as if it was eaten by the fish. Don't take it seriously. The one who spoke the loudest just now was the one who spoke the loudest. Perhaps he still felt sorry for Xiao Xian, so he turned around and ran home. After a while, he carried a bloody cow leg and stuffed it into Xiao Xian's hand as an apology. Seeing this, the others also wanted to follow suit. At this time, the person standing beside Chun said, "Mother, the most important thing now is to find the person who killed the fish." Saying this, he looked at the others, his dark brown eyes calmly sweeping the surroundings. Xiao Xian is our tribe's guest. In the future, if anyone dares to make a move without clarifying the situation, come find me. Xiao Xian discovered that after the youth finished speaking, the surrounding people were trembling. They were even more afraid than when Chun had scolded them. Chapter 158. What's wrong? Ping had gone to deliver food to Fu Shi and talked to the guards for a while. She had just returned, but before she entered the house, she saw people surrounding the pond and quickly walked over. Ping, 2 treasured fish were killed here, a woman with a loud voice said. Ping was shocked. After hearing the details, she wanted to tear the murderer into pieces. Unfortunately, the murderer was still unknown. When she heard that Xiao Xian was misunderstood again, she was very dissatisfied. Xiao Xian is a good person. He doesn't even want my water moon stone. What? There was actually someone who didn't like the water moon stone. The surrounding people suddenly felt that Xiao Xian was too safe. Those who wanted to steal the water moonstones in their tribe were not good people. Compared to them, Xiao Xian was an outsider who was not interested in the water moonstones. Everyone suddenly felt more comfortable around him. But thinking about it, how could Xiao Xian not like the water moonstone? It was such a good thing, why didn't he like it? Xiao Xian, the water moonstone is really good. You can exchange it for many things in other tribes. Yes, Xiao Xian, it must be because Fu Shi's water moonstone is small and dark. Maybe it's an old stone that has been there for a few years. Come to my house, our water moonstone is big and bright. We just fished it out last year. If it comes out this year, there will definitely be bigger ones. Come to my house, my water moonstone is big too. My daughter personally put it away last year. Oh right, my daughter is over there. She's very pretty. Xiao Xian, you will definitely like her. The auntie who spoke narrowed her eyes and pointed in the direction of her house. Xiao Xian looked in the direction the auntie was pointing at. There was a young lady standing on the steps of a house. At this moment, the lady was smiling at him with her mouth wide open from ear to ear. Probably because she had just eaten dinner, there were still traces of blood on her white teeth. It was really a big mouth. Ha! Xiao Xian turned his head and smiled stiffly. Fortunately, this was not the time to talk too much. Chun took away the 2 dead crocodiles and told everyone to pay attention to the surroundings. Also, pay attention to the small crocodiles in the pools around their houses. Xiao Xian returned to the house covered in blood, holding the beef leg. Although he had been wrong twice, he really didn't know what to do with this group of people. After all, he wasn't injured. Moreover, Xiao Xian wanted to follow them to learn more about other tribes. Now that the drumming tribe also wanted to leave a good impression on them, Xiao Xian wouldn't quarrel with them because of this. Ping looked at the baby crocodile in Xiao Xian's hand and felt sad. She had watched them break out of their shells. When they broke out of their shells, because the big crocodile had already left, she had personally helped them break out of their shells. Many people in the drumming tribe were rash and irritable, but they were also easily emotional. When they were emotional, they would talk a lot. After Ping returned, she told Xiao Xian a lot about the little crocodiles. The current batch of crocodiles in the tribe were not born during the breeding season, so they were in the minority. Without the protection of the big crocodiles, these little crocodiles were easily harmed. Therefore, every year, the people in the tribe would take special care of these little crocodiles. Generally speaking, the big crocodiles that had left would return here after the 2 moons overlapped and the river rose again. They would then lay eggs and hatch their young. At that time, a large number of baby crocodiles would be born. Seeing that only one of the 3 little crocodiles was left, Ping started crying as she spoke. At this time, Chunjia also returned home. To distract Ping, Xiao Xian brought the brown-eyed baby crocodile back to the room. Now that he had calmed down, he carefully recalled the movements he had heard before, as well as the details he saw when he walked to the pool. Although this was not the core area of the drumming tribe, there were still many houses. Other than the people guarding outside, how could there be people walking around outside? How could a fearsome beast sneak in from outside without a sound? If it was not done by an internal member, then the person who killed the 2 little crocodiles was too capable. The little crocodile that Xiao Xian brought back was still crying out. It was probably scared stiff, and did not want to return to the pool. Instead, it kept following Xiao Xian. The three little crocodiles were from the same nest and often moved together. Even if they were separated, they would not be too far apart. The people in the tribe said that these little crocodiles were very sensitive to people's likes and dislikes. Perhaps they discovered that person, which was why they cried out. They were also killed because of their cries, because if they were allowed to cry out, it would attract other people's attention. Now, the crocodile that could cry out was dead, and the mute in front of him saved its life. After comforting his mother, Chen Jia was beaten up again. He came to Xiao Xian and asked, "When you went over, you only saw the little fish that was killed. Did you really not see anyone?" Xiao Xian raised his head and looked at Chen Jia. This child had been beaten up because he ran around at night, but this injury was nothing to them. "I didn't see any strangers," Xiao Xian said. Although he was not familiar with the surrounding families, he had seen them once and had an impression of them. At that time, he did not see anyone else around, and before that, he did not notice any strangers around. Not necessarily strangers. For example, someone familiar? Chen Jia was somewhat conflicted. He was not good at hiding his thoughts, and his expression told Xiao Xian what this child was thinking. As an outsider, Xiao Xian would not easily talk about the matters of the drumming tribe. Instead, he asked, "Yesterday, who pushed you down the river?" Chen Jia raised his head in surprise. "How do you know I was pushed?" After coming back, he only told others that he accidentally fell down, but did not tell anyone the truth. "I guessed," Xiao Xian said. Although Chen Jia looked unreliable for many details, this child was still very cautious. It was impossible for him to know that there was danger at the river bank and still go there. Perhaps the drumming tribe's chief and shaman also knew, but they did not interrogate Chen Jia. They might even know more. Those two were not simple-minded people. After hiding the secret in his heart for 2 days, Chen Jia felt that he could not hold it in any longer. However, he did not dare to tell the others in the tribe. Just now, when he was outside, he tried to ask his friends about it. Their reactions were very strong, and they felt that it was definitely not someone from the tribe who did it. "So, you think there is a mole?" Xiao Xian asked. "What is a mole?" "It means that the person who did this is someone who is hiding in the tribe." "Yes. Since they all said that Xiao Xian was a good person, then he should be able to tell, right?" Chen Jia thought to himself. "That day, when I sneaked out to play, I saw some people walking towards the river bank, so I followed them. There were other people there. I heard them talking, but I did not hear what they were saying. After they left, when I walked to the river bank, I was pushed by someone." Chen Jia told Xiao Xian about what happened that day. "What did that person look like?" "I don't remember." Chen Jia bit his hand, feeling very conflicted. He really tried very hard to think, but he just could not remember. He always felt that the person's face was blurry, but looking at the figure, he really did look like someone from the tribe. If not, he would not have kept this a secret. He really could not remember what that person looked like. Xiao Xian patted Chen Jia's shoulder. "If you don't remember, then forget it. Also, don't tell anyone about this. Even if you do, you have to find someone you absolutely trust. For example, your parents. If that mole knows that you know a lot of things, you might end up like the 2 little treasured fish that were killed tonight." "Why?" Chen Jia's face was full of fear. "Because they can cry." Xiao Xian also touched the mute little crocodile in his hand, but it can't, so it survived. Chen Jia was not too stupid. After thinking for a while, he understood Xiao Xian's meaning. With a pale face, he said, I'll go find Mother first." Regardless of whether the truth was as Xiao Xian imagined, at least by scaring Chen Jia would not run around alone. Otherwise, there was a real possibility that he would be killed. When there are many tribes, it is easy to get chaotic. Don't you think so? Xiao Xian tore off a piece of meat and put it in front of the little crocodile's mouth. The teeth of crocodiles belong to the truncated tooth type. They can't directly bite off a piece of meat like cats, so they have to roll or sway to bite off the meat. This is the familiar death roll and sway dance of the crocodile. Seeing the little crocodile roll around after biting the meat, Xiao Xian thought of the people in the tribe, as well as Caesar and the others. He wondered how they were doing now. When he left the tribe, he didn't think so, but now he missed them. He remembered that on the day he left, Xiao Xian wanted to tell the shaman and old Ku not to worry. In the end, he only said 2 words before they beat him up with their crutches. Thinking of this, Xiao Xian couldn't help but laugh. The moonlight outside the window was even brighter than last night. Soon it would be the day when the 2 moons overlap. If he wanted to go back, he would have to wait at least a year. In the next few days, the tribe was very peaceful. There were no more abnormal situations, but Fu Shi and the other tribe guards were even more vigilant. The day when the 2 moons overlapped was one of the most important days of the year. Other than the sacrificial ceremony, it was also one of the most important days. They called it the Water Moon Festival. In the drumming tribe, there was a small river winding around the tribe. The people of the drumming tribe called it the Water Moon Path. Before and after the 2 moons overlapped, when the river level lowered, the Water Moon Path would be separated from the river. When the 2 moons overlapped in the night sky, every family of the drumming tribe would guard the path closest to their house, waiting for the water moonstones to appear so that they could go down to collect them. Even though Xiao Xian was curious about the production of the water moonstones, in order to avoid suspicion, he didn't take the initiative to follow them. However, Ping was very enthusiastic. It was probably because someone said that her family's water moonstones weren't good that night. She wanted to prove it in front of Xiao Xian, so she let Xiao Xian go with her. Fu Shi was responsible for guarding the path, so he didn't go with Ping and Chen Jia. My family's will definitely be the best this year. Nonsense, my family's is the best. You guys don't need to argue. In any case, the first place will definitely be my family. Before they even reached the water moon path, a group of children had already started arguing. The tribe had given each family an area. When the time came to collect the water moonstones, they could only collect them in their own area. Whether they collected more or less, they had to bear the responsibility. It had nothing to do with others. Xiao Xian, Ping, and Chen Jia stood together. This was the area of Chen Jia's family. Looking at the muddy river in front of them, which was no more than 5 meters wide, it was hard to associate it with the name Water Moon Path. Xiao Xian was looking forward to what would happen next. Such a bright stone, how did it come out from this muddy river? The 2 moons overlapped more and more in the sky. Xiao Xian suddenly heard a dense and small sound, as if iron powder was being forcefully attracted by a magnetic force. The muddy river in front of them was becoming clearer and clearer at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 159. Ping and Chen Jia stood on the shore, waiting nervously. The amount of water moonstones they could produce in this section would determine whether they would be rich or poor in the coming days. If they could produce a lot of water moonstones, and each of them was big and bright, their family would be rich this year. When the trading day came, they could bring them out to exchange for a lot of things. However, if the stones they produced were small and small, then it would be hard. Whether they were poor or rich, it all depended on this part of the river. Xiao Xian felt that this method was very novel. Ping was already praying nervously. Chen Jia was also biting his hands. He liked to bite his hands when he was nervous. The muddy river water became clearer and clearer. In less than 10 minutes, it had already become translucent. There was even light emitting from the bottom of the river. It was even more eye-catching than the moon in the sky. The muddy river gradually became clear. At the bottom of the river they could see some things emitting light. Those were the water moonstones. The white light passed through the river and reflected in the eyes of the people on the shore. Ha, ha 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 ha. Some people laughed wildly. Their part of the river was especially bright. This meant that there would be more water moonstones produced there. Some people were happy while others were worried. Some parts of the river were dimmer than others. There were a lot less water moonstones there. Ha 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 ha. Chunjia also laughed arrogantly. Their part of the river was brighter than the other two families. He laughed and made a gesture to the other two families, showing off. Ping knelt by the river bank, watching the white light at the bottom of the river get brighter and brighter. She was so excited that no one knew what she was mumbling. The surrounding families looked at Chun Jia and his mother with envy and jealousy. But there was nothing they could do. Whether it was more or less, they had already determined it. Even if they were jealous, they couldn't snatch it. They could only comfort themselves that maybe next year, their family would become like that. Xiao Xian felt the power of the fire seed. The fire seed of the drumming tribe? What kind of fire seed was this tribe that lived in the puddles and rivers? In the Yanjiao tribe, the shaman was able to connect the fire seed's power to the houses at the top of the mountain. That was why the houses at the top of the mountain were always warm during the winter. And here, the production of these water moonstones seemed to be closely related to the fire seed of the drumming tribe. No wonder Fu Shi said that this was their drumming tribe's specialty. The power of the fire seed was special. After Ping prayed and expressed her gratitude, she turned to Chun Jia, who was already itching to give it a try, and said, "Enter the water." "All right." Chun Jia flung off the beast's skin coat on his body, covering his entire body with totem patterns, and jumped into the clear and bright river. Many children from other families were like Chun Jia, impatiently jumping into the water to fish for the water moonstones. Xiao Xian noticed that when the children were swimming, their legs weren't alternately kicking the water. Instead, they were swaying left and right. Their bones seemed to have been softened. The totemic patterns covered their bodies like scales. At first glance, it looked like the powerful tail of a crocodile that was swaying in the water. The people of the drumming tribe were good swimmers. Even if they were underwater, they could stay underwater for a long time. Therefore, the work of digging the water moonstones from the bottom of the river was extremely simple for them. As the first stone dug out this year, they had to choose a big one. The people of the drumming tribe believed that a good start would lead to better result. Perhaps there would be more stones as big as this one dug out later. Therefore, the first stone had to be chosen well. Chun Jia swam back and forth at the bottom of the river. Finally, he chose a spot and dug out a very big and bright water moonstone. He didn't swim upstream, but turned around and threw it towards the river bank. The water moonstone that was thrown out of the water was accurately caught by Ping. She wiped the water off the stone and looked at it excitedly. She was so happy that she couldn't close her mouth, and the smile on her face grew wider and wider. After looking at it for a while, Ping didn't put it into the basket at the side. Instead, she handed it to Xiao Xian. "Xiao Xian, look. This is the stone my family produced this year. Isn't it big? Isn't it bright? You can definitely exchange it for many good things." Xiao Xian took it. It was cool to the touch, but it was much brighter than the one Fu Shi showed him that night. This was because it was newly produced. However, Xiao Xian still couldn't absorb any energy from it. He could only feel that this stone was related to the drumming tribe's fire seed and totem. Other than the fire seed and totem, these stones were also closely related to the crocodiles that had followed the river downstream. According to the people of the drumming tribe, when the crocodiles returned, they would spit out some stones from their stomachs into the water moon canal. These stones would eventually become water moonstones. Every year, after the water moonstones were picked out, new stones would enter, and the next year, new stones would be picked up. But without these crocodiles, there wouldn't be any water moonstones here. The people of the drumming tribe didn't know how many stones were spat out by the treasured fish, and which of these stones could become water moonstones. Even if it was artificially changed, the results would be different from what they expected. In the end, they could only pray to the totem, hoping for more gift. This was also the main reason why the drumming tribe called the crocodiles the treasured fish. Xiao Xian had a classmate in his past life who also raised crocodiles. He also heard that his family's crocodiles ate stones, and the stones they ate were called stomach stones. They were used to help the crocodiles grind down food that was difficult to digest. He wondered if the stones the drumming tribe's crocodiles spat out in the water moon canal were also used as stomach stones. Previously, the most turbid river in the entire tribe actually produced such bright water moonstones. What a magical place! After looking, Xiao Xian carefully placed the stone into a rattan basket at the side. Seeing Xiao Xian's actions, Ping's impression of Xiao Xian became even better. She fished out the newly placed stone and stuffed it into Xiao Xian's hands. Take it. When you go out in the future, you can use it to exchange for many good things. When you go to other tribes to exchange for things you want, you'll know how good water moonstones are. This was the feeling of becoming a nouveau riche. With such a big stone, giving it away didn't hurt at all. Ping didn't say much. After stuffing the stone into Xiao Xian's hands, she hurriedly went to receive the other stones that Chen Jia threw up. Thank you. Xiao Xian put the stone into the animal skin bag and helped Ping look after the rattan basket. Tonight it was not a peaceful night. Danger was lurking. Not only Xiao Xian, but the people of the drumming tribe were also prepared. Every year at this time, many things would happen. They were already used to it and were ready to fight at any time. That was why they let their children fish for stones, while the adults at home were always vigilant of their surroundings. Once they found anything unusual, they would join in the battle. Not far from the water moon canal, Fu Shi and his companions were vigilantly watching their surroundings. However, they also wanted to know the situation at the water moon canal. They didn't know how their own family's situation was this year. I feel that my family will definitely have a lot this year, Fu Shi said. My family definitely won't have less than yours. The people beside Fu Shi were not convinced. I don't expect it to be the most, as long as it's not too little. Another person whispered. Useless. Sigh, even if I wanted to, I couldn't decide. So I don't have much hope. As they were talking, the people who came to investigate the situation at the water moon canal came over. Fu Shi, your family is rich this year. That part of your house is the brightest, the man said while panting. Fu Shi was so excited that he couldn't wait to jump a few rounds. This is great. And, when the time comes to trade, I'll get more good things. I'll get a few beautiful clothes for Ping, and a few better stone tools for Chen Jia. These people were like Fu Shi. Although their family didn't have as much as Fu Shi's family this year, it was still quite a lot. When the time comes to trade, what should they get? Just as they were thinking, Fu Shi's face froze. The muscles under his skin suddenly swelled, causing his already sturdy body to become even thicker. Black totem patterns covered his entire body like sturdy scales. His legs instantly exploded with a powerful force, and he disappeared from the spot. In one step, he caught up with the person who wanted to rush over. Fu Shi's swollen arms were instantly raised high. His arms were covered with totem patterns, and every muscle was filled with power. His skin became even tighter under the expansion of his muscles. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and he quickly smashed towards the person. Like a cannonball, his fist smashed onto the person's body. Bang! The person who was about to rush out was smashed to the ground with all his strength. Just as the first fist landed, the second fist followed. Ka! Fu Shi's fist directly smashed the other person's head. The person lying on the ground had different totem patterns from the drumming tribe. because of the death of the main body, they quickly disappeared. The sound of Fu Shi's breathing was not the usual sound of wheezing, but a series of rough grunts. His pupils were like the tip of a sword, and some dense black patterns extended from there to the surroundings. His eyes flashed coldly. After killing one person, Fu Shi did not stop. The muscles in his legs suddenly swelled, and his originally low body suddenly fell to the ground. His palms and legs vigorously slammed the ground, and his body quickly pushed out, rushing towards another person. The wet, muddy water under his feet splashed everywhere. Competing with a crocodile in long distance running was possible, but competing with it in an instant was difficult. The advantage of a crocodile was not speed, but reaction and explosive power. You might be able to outrun them, but the problem was whether they gave you a chance to run at the start of the race. Perhaps, before you could run, they had already bitten you. The people of the drumming tribe had many characteristics similar to crocodiles. They were strong and their speed was not fast. But in an instant, their opponents would always be overwhelmed. Another person was clamped down by Fu Shi, and in the next moment, he was twisted in the middle. Just now, the two people who passed by were too fast, and did not give Fu Shi enough time to send a message to the others. Now, after dealing with two opponents in succession, Fu Shi took advantage of this gap and roared from his throat like an ancient beast. The roar passed through the wet area, through the forest, like a war knife, splitting the silence of the night. The moon in the sky shone brightly, but under the moonlight, the battle had already begun. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.